Hello again, friends, and you are our friends. Welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here on this beautiful day, wherever you are, indoors, hopefully wearing a mask. It seems like a lot of people are congregating outside without masks on. You can't do that right now. We're still trying to get society back in order. Apologies in advance if you hear a lawnmower in the background. It's that time of year here at Last Manor. But of course, here on this show, we answer your questions, which are sent in a number of times to I can't even remember the email address, to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com and on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru. I'm your host, the great Bryan Last, and I'll be answering. I do this every time. I'll be asking your questions to the man who will be answering said questions, the leader and exalted one of the cult of Cornette, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Oh, good Lord. Was there vodka in your French toast this morning?
I wish.
You were just rambling, falling down the stairs verbally, having a series of small strokes out loud. What the fuck was that all about?
I wish I had something to blame it on. I could blame it on the fact that we do this every week without a script.
Are you still on the smack? Are you on the horse?
I'm not on.
You kicked that, didn't you? Dancing with Mr. Brownstone?
Another word for that? Charlie.
Oh, Charlie. Ah, so now we understand where Charlie and where the suspicious packages are dropped out of the planes. It's all coming together now. The fucking Johnny Rotten of podcasting here. Well, I guess Sid Vicious was the bad one. Famous drug addicts we have known. I don't know what the fuck.
Well, Johnny was into speed. Sid Vicious was into heroin.
Oh, well, at least they had their own separate interests away from the group.
That's right.
Anyway, the premise of this program is that you ask and I answer, and the cult sends in the questions. Charlie sends in the questions, and then occasionally somebody else's gets fucking slicked up with some Vaseline and wormed through. And we do this as it is, since it's released on a Monday, we do this on a Sunday. And normally I'm in the middle of some other major project, running the empire here, the Cornette's Collectibles empire, the podcasting empire, the whatever empire I happen to be running that morning, and I'm all verklempt. But today, you know what I'm doing, Bryan? To keep my spirits high and my stress level low before the big week we've got coming up, we're going to talk about in a minute. You know what I'm doing today? I've heard this phrase now, started hearing this recently, last year or so, right? I'm taking a mental health day. Do you know what that is?
I have an idea what it is.
Well, apparently, when the way I've heard it used, in the context I've heard it used, it's like 40 years ago when you just didn't want to go to work because you were fucking fed up with it. You'd rather have your balls nailed to a step stool and go to fucking work that day. You called up and you made some kind of goddamn excuse. I'm sick. The car broke down. My God, it snowed. I'm in the ditch. The dog ate my homework, whatever it may be, and hoped for the best, being that you didn't get fired. But now there is a name for that now. It's called a mental health day. It's when you just said, fuck it. I guess people I don't know. I know this is at the post office. Because, of course, that's my, social reference over the past several months. But you can get a mental health day a few times a year where it's just like, fuck it. I'm going to go off on some asshole. And I guess maybe that's where the term going postal comes from. But
too bad you didn't have any of those in WCW.
Are you kidding? Every day that people like Sid were gone and not working, they were taking mental health days. They were not working because they were mentally ill.
Saying you on the booking committee. Too bad you didn't have any mental health days.
I wouldn't have gone. The talent, was never there. I wouldn't have gone one day for my mental health. But anyway, it's a mental health day, and that's what I'm doing already this morning. I'm getting away from business. We talk about it off the air on our telephone conversations. I'm playing permanent whack-a-mole, trying to keep ahead of all this stuff. And I never take a day off. And today I filled the water softeners with salt this morning. cut up the cardboard in the garage. As soon as we finish recording this fine program, I'm going out in the yard with a weed whacker, a trowel to dig up the weeds and some of the mulch beds, a wheelbarrow, picking up sticks and branches, raking things, tidying out in the nature. It's going to be a beautiful day here. I put some deer food out under the poplar tree and beautiful Bambi Eaton has been dining there every evening this week, along with her cute little small child who we haven't determined whether it's a he or she or what we're going to call it yet. I'm going to commune with nature. I'm going to be very positive today. You should do more of this type of thing.
I've got a lot of nature here. That's not a problem.
You got a lot of nature. But I got a lot of nature here too, but for the past fucking 4 months, I haven't gone out and communed with any of it. I've been too busy preparing things for the customers of Cornette's Collectibles.
Now, usually when we're in the yard, we're on the lookout to see that none of these things come into the backyard to commune with us.
Well, it depends on what you're wanting to commune with.
We have bears, we have deer, we have bats, we have raccoons, there's a neighborhood cat.
I don't want any of the bats.
I saw a frog the other day for the first time since we've been here.
Wait a minute. Oh, thank you for adding that qualifier.
Since we've been here,
I saw a frog the other day for the first time. Can you imagine the first person that ever saw a frog was probably, what the fuck is that? It would be off-putting if you didn't know what the fuck it was supposed to be to begin with. So maybe you were traumatized. That's what happened to the open today. You were traumatized by seeing a fucking frog.
The Fox of Last Manor seems to have a friend. Always be on the lookout for that.
Fox and Friends.
It's Fox and Friend. That's right. That's right.
Oh, well, you could. Okay, so you can tell what kind of show it's going to be, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get out of our Disney movie backyards for a second. And the reason for my mental health day is because hell is coming this week. It's going to be, and this is, of course, this show is airing on Monday, June 15th, correct?
That is correct. Hell Day.
Somewhere in the late afternoon, the way things have been going for you lately. Is that right?
I would say that's correct.
Okay, we've mentioned it last week on the drive-thru. We mentioned it last week on the experience. For those of you who have not heard, and it may be too late, but I'm giving you an update. The official Jim Cornette action figure first ever variant edition, the red and green that was supposed to be for the holiday season last year and took a year and a half to arrive from the manufacturers in China, has just now arrived and went on sale at 9 a.m. this morning and may already be sold out. We don't know how these things go. So if you go to jimcornette.com and click on the collectibles bar on the homepage, it'll take you right to the store where you will then see whether there is an action figure listed or not. If it's not listed anymore, that means all 400 of them sold out already. If it is still listed, I would advise you, if you really want it, to do it quickly because, as I said, we don't know how these things are going to go, but the last few things we had a limited number of went quick. So don't nobody get mad at me for not giving you. Is that a sufficient warning, you think, for everybody, Great Bryan Last?
Yes, and I think people know how this goes from the past year and a half or so.
But the good thing is there can only be 400, and once those are gone, there ain't going to be no more, and at least till 2021, the way things have been going. So we didn't get as many as we wanted. We didn't get nearly enough. So anyway, jimcornette.com, click on collectibles. If there's a figure there for sale, snatch it up quick. And be aware that if you have already sent me money for these other products that we don't even mention anymore that sell so well on the website that we try not to plug except when absolutely necessary, everything through morning of June the 3rd that has been ordered is now in the mail except for a few domestically through June the 3rd. We just restocked on the Gardens books, and those are going out first of the week if you ordered one of those. Everything else domestically has gone out, and all the internationals are packed up and ready to start going out at the first of the week. And then all week this week, while we attempt to assess the damage from the flood of orders on the action figures, if you ordered between June the 3rd and June the 13th, I'm staying home all day, every day after I get back from the post office to pack your stuff up, and it'll be headed out by the end of this week or the first of next week, depending on where you fall. And then if you order an action figure that may or may not sell out quickly, that stuff is going to start being processed about a week to 9 days after your orders so that we can still meet that 2 to 3 week self-inflicted deadline that we've tried to stay up with. International orders do take longer. And I'm hearing from people that I sent stuff out to them internationally, UK, Australia, almost 2 months ago, that are just getting their packages, and a couple people out there that have not got theirs yet, but we're trying to locate these things. The pandemic is slowing down customs more than it's slowing down the mail services. But the customs on those international packages is the wild card here. It's a Charlie wild card. You usually pop from Always Sunny references.
Oh, I was thinking of Charlie from Starkville, not Charlie Day.
No, Charlie Day. It's a wild card. The customs is the wild card.
That episode where he jumps out of the back of the van. Wild card!
Wild card! Anyway, so thank you, everybody, for your support of that website that I've already mentioned too much. And that all I'm going to be doing is trying to service your units. I'm going to try to service you as best I can all week until I drop over of complete exhaustion. Anyway,
I guess we should say here, though, here at the top of the show, Jim, on the topic of mental health and doing things, you didn't watch any wrestling specific for this show, but we have heard from a lot of listeners that wanted you to review. On SmackDown this past week, there was a Daniel Bryan AJ Styles match that a lot of the listeners are raving about, so we're going to try to get you a link to that for the experience this week.
Yeah, well, it should be on demand because we're going to talk about it on the experience. I did not think to record SmackDown this past week because I wasn't aware that a wrestling match was going to break out. So now that we know this, we think it's going to be on demand. I hadn't had a chance to watch it anyway, but between now and this week's experience, I'll catch up with that, and we'll talk about AJ and Daniel Bryan. Because I don't want any spoilers. I don't know anything about it. I just heard from you this morning because I've been incommunicado. So I don't want any spoilers. I don't know whether people thought it was great or a letdown or who won or whatever the fuck. I'm gonna stay away from it. I'm gonna watch it as it aired. Just if you haven't seen it, it's new to you, right?
That's right. Well, one thing I did send you, thinking you may enjoy it, is it had just popped up. I had never seen it. I don't think anyone else had, except for people who saw it during the original airing. An edition of Southeastern Championship Wrestling from late July, 1978.
Yes, and my old friend Joe Dombrowski is working with Les Thatcher on some projects, and they have dug up a couple of these things, I guess. And this, you tweeted it out, and I retweeted it, and also got a chance. It was just this morning. I haven't watched all of it yet, but I did watch the match I was most interested in, and then just a couple of pieces of it from there. But this would, now that we've started talking about it and realized what date and et cetera it was, and the matches that are being promoted and et cetera, this TV show was the week before the WFIA, the Wrestling Fans International Association convention in Knoxville, the first week of August. I guess, or it was the last week of July, whatever it was. I got the fucking program in the other room. I didn't think to pick it up. But anyway, this was the week before the summertime convention of the WFIA, where all the wrestling fans from around the country that were somewhat smart, and even all of them weren't. Eloise Mascoro was not smart from Dallas, but she loved the Von Erichs. She loved wrestling. So she got started with it. But anyway, there'd be about 50 or 60 or 70. This was probably the 75% of the pool of smart fans in the country back then, right? That would have this convention. And we went to Knoxville in 78. That's the first one I went to. That's where I met Les Thatcher and Ron Fuller and some of these guys. And So this was the TV that was the week beforehand where Ronnie Garvin and Boris Malenko were promoting their Russian chain match. One of the most, I would say most famous, but one of my favorite wrestling pictures that I ever took, and actually it's been in a number of magazines and places, was the Mongolian Stomper who Malenko managed and coordinated, ran in and while a referee was down, and Garvin is literally, we thought he was going to bleed out. He was just bleed. It was ridiculous amounts of blood. He's bleeding, and the Stomper is standing over him, and he's trying to take the Russian chain off his wrist. And I took that picture. It's one of my favorite ones. There's an 8x10 of it hanging up over my front office window here, as a matter of fact. But anyway, the reason why I was interested in this show was because anytime that there's a Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey match that I haven't seen or that exists on tape because there's so few of them, I got to watch it, right? And it just, I mean, I know how good Dennis was, but it gave me, once again, a further appreciation of Phil Hickerson as just being as Jerry Jarrett would say, the epitome of professional wrestling. A big fucking tough redneck fuck from Jackson, Tennessee, who could work his ass off and moved like crazy for his body and cut a believable promo because he was just him talking. And he and Dennis were my favorite heel tag team before the Midnight Express. And they had a 5 solid year period where they just rotated between the 3 Tennessee territories. Jerry Jarrett was running the Memphis end, which included Louisville and Evansville and Lexington. Goulas was running the Nashville end, which still, when they started, included Birmingham and Chattanooga. And Ron Fuller was running Southeastern and Knoxville and the Tri-Cities. And you could work full time in each territory. So they would go from being the main event heel team in one. When their run was up, they'd just bop over to one of the others, and they rotated because they were so good you never got tired of them.
And they had a record-setting run against Fargo for Goulas in, what, 76?
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, when they Roughhouse would come home or come over to Tennessee to visit Jackie for a couple weeks at Christmas back in those days. And so they did a deal with Condrey and Hickerson and the Fargo brothers, and good Lord, definitely Birmingham was huge. Chattanooga, I think, sold out. They drew big in Nashville. We got a couple of the matches up here in Louisville, and they were doing 5,000 people in Louisville for a couple weeks in a row to see, the Fargos reunite. But that was the deal where Hickerson hardwayed Fargo on TV. The story is in my book, Tuesday Night at the Gardens, which is flying off the shelves if anyone's interested at that same website we don't talk about. But Fargo knew that Roughhouse was coming in, and there were, as hard as it may be now for people to understand, there were still a couple of different circuits in the Goulas territory before Jerry Jarrett split off. And this is going to be a little history lesson, but what the fuck? You got to understand it. The territory was so big, they had regular weekly towns like Birmingham and Memphis ran on Monday nights. So they had to have different talent. And they had 4 or 5 still at the time live studio wrestling television programs. Chattanooga had a live studio show. Memphis had a live studio show. Birmingham had a live studio show. There was one for a while in Huntsville, blah, blah, blah. So to maximize revenue for their holiday 2 weeks before and during Christmas week, big shows with the Fargos, the Bounty Hunters and Jimmy Kent were a heel team in part of the territory, and Hickerson and Condrey were a heel team in another part of the territory. And Fargo did a deal where he had Phil Hickerson work with him. And goddamn, I can't remember the locations off the top of my head. This is where you need Scott Teal. But it was like fucking Chattanooga TV that afternoon. He worked with Phil Hickerson and had Hickerson hardway him, punched him in the fucking face several times for real so that he could bust his fucking eye. Of course, Hickerson knew what he was doing as far as trying to bust somebody's eyebrow open and trying to close somebody's eye up because your cheek is swollen up. But anyway, boom. And the people in the studio, I saw this fucking tape. It aired up here in Louisville. And the people were shitting themselves and they're screaming because they can tell he punched him right in the face, and it sounded like that in person, right? And Fargo's trying to fight back, but he's gigged and then he's busted open, hard way and blah, blah, blah. And it was a heavy fucking angle that they did. And finally he and Condrey beat Fargo just all the way down, and he got saved and everything by the baby faces. And he got up and he swore with his, in the closing segment of the show was with Harry Thornton, the announcer. There's Fargo where you can tell his head's busted open and his eyes swelling shut, and he's looking right in the camera, swearing that Hickerson and Condrey are going to be fucking done after he calls his brother Roughhouse, right? And then that night in like the Huntsville, Alabama television was after the late news Central Time, so like 10:30. That was when the live studio show was down there. Down there, the bounty hunters and Jimmy Kent are beating up fucking some job guy team, and nobody knows why Jackie Fargo hasn't showed up. And then Fargo runs into the goddamn studio with his fucking clothes ripped up and throws his suitcase aside and hits the ring and makes a big comeback on the fucking bounty hunters. And then cuts a promo saying that they ran him off the road earlier that evening on his way to the fucking studio. And look at what they did to my face. And that TV aired in places, and they had the Fargos come back and get even against the bounty hunters and Hickerson and Condrey for 3 solid weeks in every town in the territory, depending on what TV show aired where. And goddamn made 2 angles off the same hard way. And nobody in the different towns ever knew the fucking difference.
Scott Teal told me that Hickerson and Condrey versus Jackie Fargo was the hottest program he remembered for all those years that he was with Nick Goulas.
Yeah, because Scott came he came from Florida after he got out of college. He moved up to Nashville, and I'm going to say he got to Nashville in probably late 72, early 73, or elsewise he would have seen Jackie Fargo and Al Green. But except for Jackie Fargo and Al Green, that was Fargo and Hickerson. Well, not only that, just everybody with Hickerson and Condrey as a tag team, they were so good because they looked completely different, and they looked like completely different people. But at the same time, you could tell that they had a chemistry with each other and they got along. It's sort of like Laurel and Hardy didn't look anything like each other, but there was a contrast, but you could tell they fit together. There was a chemistry. And I'm not trying to say they were fucking comedians, although the Tennessee bullshit gaga with Hickerson and Condrey was fucking flawless, and it worked every time because they never winked at anybody. They always fucking it always looked, when they fucked up and did the fucking gaga stuff where they had double knockouts, it always looked like an accident. It always looked like they were surprised. They did something every night. It was like the first time that anything like that had ever happened to them. Their facials were tremendous by their body language. Dennis learned a lot of his body language from Hickerson. Hickerson was a main event guy pretty much from the time that he broke in Tennessee, because early on, he was such a big, powerful looking guy for the time. Didn't have a muscle on his body, as we'll get to in a minute. But he was easily 270 pounds, and just fucking his hands were just thick, and his fists, and he just ugly fucking bulldog face. He was a redneck from Jackson. And he could talk believably, because every fucking redneck from Jackson can brag about fucking kicking your ass and call you names, right? As part of being a redneck from Jackson. There are none now, I guess. They're not on television, at least. But you believed he looked like a fucking guy that would get out of a fucking truck and beat the piss out of you with a fucking stick. And he was a natural worker. And when Al Green was having what was going to be his last run, turned out to be kind of his next to last run as a wrestler, as a top heel. And his brother Don was working full time for Goulas as a single. They put Hickerson together with Al Green, who taught him all kinds of old fucking tag team heel heat bullshit. But then Hickerson moved. He could fucking come off the top, flying leg drops off the top. He took backdrops. If you threw him over the top rope, he did a battle royal finish one time. Never seen anything like it, where the babyface threw him over the top rope, and as soon as he went over, the babyface turned his back, and Hickerson held on and swung back around and came back in over the top rope, all in one motion. This big, fat, 6'1", maybe 270-pound fucking redneck with a belly twice as big as his chest, and he could just do that shit. And all of his shit looked legitimate because he didn't try to get too fancy, and a lot of times he just punched and broad-armed people in the fucking head. But it worked, and he and Dennis got a ton of heat. And I've mentioned before the rib that Dennis played on Phil one time for Tojo Yamamoto, but what they did in the ring was, this is the mid-'70s, right? It wouldn't play today, but God, it was classic. It's the mid-'70s in Tennessee and Alabama and fucking Mississippi, right? Wherever. So they bleached their hair blonde. And in 1976, they teamed up in 75. They bleached their hair blonde. And the first thing they do in 76 is they both start wearing red, white, and blue outfits. And Phil calls himself the Spirit of 76 and the Bicentennial Kings, right? And they're wearing all this fucking sequin shit. And then they went to where Phil had the imprint of a fucking set of lips on the ass of his trunks, right? And Dennis had some wild ass shit on his trunks, and they do the old heel spot where every time the fucking babyface came out on top and bumped him around, they'd go to the corner and hug each other. And of course, now everybody thinks they're gay. Well, God, Phil Hickerson looks the furthest thing from any homosexual human being I've ever seen in my life. And fucking Dennis with the bright blonde hair, may have been different, but they fucking milked that for all it was worth, to the point where some of the boys even like, holy shit. And it was just classic heel heat. And then when they'd have people ready to fucking knife them, then the babyface would make a big fucking comeback, and they would bump everywhere. But they were always an exciting team to watch, and their shit always looked good. The body language was excellent, and they were just classic heel tag team of the time. And Phil, when they fucking worked with Tojo, his favorite thing to call Tojo, I guess you couldn't do that today, you bullet-headed Jap. You bullet-headed Jap. But we're going to play a section of this promo that they did in a second. But everybody that was watching these TV shows, and since there were only 3 channels in every town, everybody was. The wrestling show had a fucking 30 or 40 fucking share in every goddamn market. Everybody, this is why this worked, because everybody in the world that was watching knew somebody like that, whether it was their uncle, their grandfather, the asshole that worked at the goddamn gas station. Everybody knew some fucking asshole like that sounded and looked like Phil Hickerson, and they hated it when he beat up the fucking guys that they liked and called them names and et cetera, et cetera. And it was that fucking simple, but it worked. And then the guy just had to back it up. But you've got the interview from this show from Knoxville we were talking about in 78, right? With Ron Wright was managing. But and to add fucking superstar name to the mix, Ron Wright's managing Hickerson and Condrey as the top heel team in Knoxville, right?
That's right. Let's play this right now. It's set up by Phil Rainey, who was the co-host to Les Thatcher on Southeastern Championship Wrestling. Let's hear this.
Against Rip Smith. Also in the Southeastern title match, the Mongolian Stomper, managed by Don Carson, takes on Robert Fuller. And in the special chain match, a Russian chain match, Boris Malenko meets Ronnie Garvin. And also a Southeastern tag title match. The champions, Dennis Condrey and Phil Hickerson, presented by Ron Wright, meets Jimmy Golden and Bob Roop, and that tandem managed by Bill Golden. Now let's hear from Ron Wright.
Let me tell you something. It's a crying shame. We took these titles and we've defended against them 2 idiots 10, 15, maybe 20 times. We beat them every time. And why the Southeastern organization comes up and forces my men.
Wait a minute. I've told you 1,000 times that you're talking way over these people's head up there in Hazard, Kentucky. This man is a smart man. He's been in every kind of institution all the way across the country. Let me tell you something. Bill Golden, you dog. And that's exactly what you is a dog. I hope that you are there in Hazard. I want you to go out there and I want you to manage them boys because you're going to be so humiliated. We're going to humiliate you so bad we're going to do it through your boy. We're going to beat him and we're going to beat his brains out. After we're through, we're going to stick his toes in his ears, baby, and you're in a hell of a position when you get that happen. Bill Golden, you come out there and if you make one move, baby, I'm going to put my fist right upside your head. And if you go down, I'm going to put the bionic leg right across your neck. And they're going to tote you out, Bill Golden. You're a dog. Your family is a bunch of dogs. Oh, what more can I say?
He said enough, and that's the way it ought to be, but we're going to defend them titles and hang on to them, I assure you.
Well, there it is, Jim. Phil Hickerson.
You're a dog. Your family's dogs. I'll tell you what, when you get your toes stuck in your ears, you're in a hell of a position. Oh, goddamn. Nobody had to write that, right? And everybody said, that fucking asshole. I'd like to goddamn... But anyway,
because you watch it too, and obviously this is one of the problems with modern wrestling, but he looks like he believes it. He looks like he's telling the truth. He looks like he's being honest about what he wants to do. He doesn't look like someone who's been given words to say. He doesn't look like someone pretending to be someone he's not. He doesn't look like someone playing a role. He looks and sounds like someone who means what he's going to say, and that's what got people into the doors in Hazard, Kentucky for that match.
Oh, my God. And everybody's, in Hazard, Kentucky. Hazard, Kentucky in the southeastern days would do, because I've been to the building. It didn't do as well in Smoky Mountain as it did back in the fucking 70s and early 80s. You could do fucking 3,000 or 4,000 people in Hazard, Kentucky. And they would come out for that shit and they would attempt to knife those guys. But nobody did a fucking Burning Hammer Phoenix 450 fucking one winged tooth fairy splash. Anyway, but so you tweeted that, and I got to go back and watch the whole show because there's a bunch of other good stuff on it. And thanks Les and Joe Dombrowski for finding this stuff, and everybody should find them. But anyway, that brought up then something. Who do you remember who tweeted the Hickerson Hellwig confrontation?
No, I actually didn't see the tweet where...
You didn't see this? Okay, well, after that, somebody had tweeted that to me, and I retweeted a couple things. If you don't follow me on Twitter, and if you're a Republican, don't bother, because you get blocked as soon as you out yourself. But if you are a sane, rational human being who likes old-time wrestling and basically wants to follow me, you get to see some of this stuff at the Jim Cornette. But anyway... Somebody tweeted the thing with Hickerson and Hellwig where they said Hickerson's best line ever, and it was one of them, was when he came out and he told Jim Hellwig and Steve Borden on Memphis TV when they had been in the business 15 minutes, the only thing you guys are better at me than doing is sticking needles up your butt with steroids, or however he phrased it. But here's the setup for this. What had gone on before this? That Rick Bassman idiot out in California had sent pictures he had gone to, as everyone knows now that's seen the Sting or the Warrior documentaries, he'd gone to gyms in Southern California and found a bunch of bodybuilders. I think he had 4 of them originally. And he had attempted to train them for professional wrestling. Who he was to be able to train people, I have no idea, because he was never anybody to begin with, and the training showed. 2 of them dropped out, but Jim Hellwig and Steve Borden, later known as obviously the Ultimate Warrior and Sting, continued with it. And he sent their pictures to like every promoter in the world. And Jerry Jarrett is the one that bit because they looked like human cartoons. I mean, Hellwig was way bigger than he ever was any other time in his career. He had to be 320. He was warlord size.
Massive. Yeah.
And Sting was bigger than he'd ever been or would be again. And so Jerry Jarrett saw the pictures. He's like, well, and they'll come cheap because who are they? They're nobody, right? So I had seen them either just before or just after this fucking deal they did with Hickerson took place. Because in 1985, I've told this story, but it's a long time ago. We got a bunch of new listeners. 1985. I come home to Louisville for Christmas to visit my mom and everybody, obviously. And I was here on a Tuesday, and so I was going to go down to the Gardens and say hello to Miss Jarrett and see some of the boys. And so I get there that night, and I'm talking to Lawler, Dundee's there, and Miss Jarrett's there, and etc. I'm talking to everybody. That's why Tom Prichard and Pat Rose were the heavily bodies being managed by Sherry Martel till this time. Last time I'd seen Sherry before that, she'd broke her leg. This time, Tom broke his leg. I was the fucking cat of death amongst those people. And then during the matches, everybody flooded. The baby faces would watch the matches in the Louisville Gardens on the right-hand side where the baby faces came out, and the heels would watch the matches on the left-hand side where the heels came out. There was a back section blocked off where you could go sit down in the general admission and the people couldn't come to you. And I noticed everybody's flooding out of the locker room, and everybody's going outside. I'm like, what the fuck? It's Lawler and Dundee's match, and they're working with these two guys. I think they were the first name was the Freedom Fighters, or was that the fucking, they were the Blade Runners, the Freedom Fighters, Borden and Hellwig. In like 6 weeks, they had two or three different names. But anyway, the match that night was Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee against Hellwig and Borden. And the curtains are both sold out. And I'm asking somebody, because I've seen these guys, and they look like human cartoons. And I'm like, where did they come from? And they said, they came from California, and watch this. Apparently, Jerry Jarrett had said, all right, let's see if we can, maybe this was the last ditch effort. They'd already gone through a couple of things. They were only there a few weeks, but basically he had told Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee to go 30 minutes Broadway with these guys. And he said, let's see what the fuck my two magicians can do. It was the worst match I've ever seen either Jerry Lawler or Bill Dundee involved in. I don't know what they did everything, tried to get everything that they could possibly think of to do with two guys who had never been in a ring before in about 3 times in that 30 minutes. And that was kind of like, I think, the evaluation, because as I think about it, they came in the first week, I think supposedly baby faces because they looked so good. But then they switched them heel. That's why they'd been working with Lawler and Dundee. And then they gave them for 2 weeks. Buddy Wayne was their manager because they couldn't talk either. And they sounded like two idiots. And then they were gone. But during this, they also tried to do something with Phil Hickerson. And they were getting all their, I guess Jarrett was trying to get all their veterans, because they knew Buddy could talk. So he, as a manager, okay, he'd done that before. He's got Lawler in the ring with him. He's got Dundee in the ring with him. He's got Hickerson in the ring with him. Can anybody get anything out of these guys? And the answer was no. And of course, as we all know, then Bill Watts bit because he figured maybe he could do something with them. And that's when he ran Hellwig off saying, please get out of this business. But Sting stayed and actually learned and got better. But I've heard stories from the boys also that during this program, the Ultimate Warrior was just astonished and dumbfounded. Why in the world that he would have to sell for or put Phil Hickerson over, because he's looking at Hickerson and seeing his physique and that he's an old guy, not realizing that Phil Hickerson would have gotten out of his fucking truck and just beat the teetotal bejesus out of fucking Jim Hellwig in a goddamn shoot in about 15 seconds. But he was offended that he was asked to sell for him. So in this angle that they do, you can't see it obviously because we're audio, but Hickerson makes a point of picking him up and giving him a full fucking scoop slam. And Hellwig, if he did cooperate, it was minimal. He may just not have known how. But everything that Phil does looks great. Everything that when Hellwig was trying to throw forearms, he looked like he was trying to fuck a sheep. It was just god awful. But this is the promo from Memphis TV that Hickerson cut on the Ultimate Warrior when they came face to face. And Hickerson knew exactly what he'd been saying about him behind his back.
Guys, Phil Hickerson. Well, it takes a little time, Jim. I mean, this doesn't happen overnight.
Well, we understand we're a little green and new to the area and stuff like that, but when you take into account what we look like, our physiques and the rock-hard muscle that we're carrying, that should add up to some of the disadvantages compared to, the fat people, the king of all the fast food restaurants, Jerry Lawler and Phil Hickerson. spends his days. He never goes to the gym, never seen the inside of a gym.
Yeah, but he's held a lot of titles now. Let me make that difference right there. That Hickerson, and I have always agreed with him, but the son of a gun has been at it a long time, Jim. And you and Steve, I think, got to take that in.
Title shot.
I think they're probably in a hurry, Phil, and
I got to tell you, man, I ain't got nothing against you, you know. And since y'all been here, I've been trying to hit y'all, you know. I've been talking to them like, you ain't got no right to come out here and say, hey, I hadn't seen the inside of a gym and I'm fat. And then I said, you don't have a little right to say that. Let me tell you something. You know the reason why you had to wrestle against Lawler and any, like Dundee, Mantell, myself, or Coco, the reason you two have not wrestled in them matches because you're green and you don't know how to wrestle. The only thing that you know how to do, brother, is to pull them britches down and put them steroids in that booty. That's the only thing that you two idiots know, and you know it. You know, this 22-inch arm, I'll put your head in there and smash it like a rotten tomato. Don't scare me one damn bit, brother, because one thing about it, I can wrestle, and I can fight, and that's something that you can't do. You cannot do either one, and that's the reason why you're going to reach wrestling in the first and second matches the rest of your damn life.
all right, Phil. I think they heard it out there. I think they got the point.
You don't have no right to come out here and say anything about anybody, brother. Yeah, we do. We have a lot of rights. All the help and stuff that you can... That's right. Yeah, I'm telling you that right now, boy. Let's go. Let's go. Hey, come on.
And you heard those people screaming because Phil just said, fuck it. He's in his goddamn blue jeans and his fucking shirt. And he just pulls his fucking shirt tail out and starts and locks up with his big muscle head. And it goes south from there, obviously. But anyway, that, you know, that's what everybody is missing, is any kind of genuine emotion and any kind of genuine delivery, and just being somebody that looks like who they're supposed to fucking be and acts like it. And anyway, Hickerson was, it's the Phil Hickerson appreciation drive-through, but he was always one of my favorite guys to watch. He made a great babyface. He switched babyface when he saved, oh, God damn it. He saved Jimmy Golden, I think, from Barnes and Dundee one day on Studio Wrestling when they, for whatever reason, they had established that all the baby faces or anybody else that could have helped were otherwise occupied or gone or whatever. And Hickerson hit the ring and fucking Barnes and Dundee bumped through the fucking roof for him. And he was a great fucking baby face. He just had fire and oomph and his shit looked right. And he had to take a break. He and Dennis broke up in 79 because he had a bad knee injury and something else. And he took a few years off and came back and worked Memphis during this time period, 84, 85, 86. And I remember one of the Great American Bash shows where we co-promoted with Crockett and came to Memphis and worked with Jarrett. We're standing in the back. They're using Phil as a baby face. And now, because once again, everybody knew somebody like him down there. So when he was a baby face, for whatever reason, the black people in Memphis loved him. So he was wearing a goddamn tuxedo jacket with tails and fucking coming to the ring to fucking Party Train by the Gap Band. And it worked. And he was the fucking Phil Hickerson from Jackson, Tennessee, with that fucking face was the hottest, fucking baby face for the black audience, right? And Tully Blanchard was standing back there going, what the fuck is this? Because he's never seen Phil. I said, that's Phil Hickerson. I said, man, he's just, he's always worked around here, but he's fucking great. I said, he and Dennis Condrey were the best heel team I ever saw before the Midnight Express. He said, you never saw me and Gino? I said, yes, I did. Which may be why Tully didn't like me so much. But anyway, but yeah, so that was that. I thought we should have some fucking, and we will finish this bit with an Ultimate Warrior story and a question that I cannot answer. Because now that we've gone from Al Green taking Phil Hickerson under his wing in 1974 to Hickerson and Condrey dominating Tennessee in the late 70s to Hickerson being a classic gimmick babyface in the 80s, and telling off the fucking Ultimate Warrior and all those things, except for the part about you'll never get past the first match, were true throughout the Ultimate Warrior's entire career. Now we put the period on it with the Ultimate Warrior. I got a letter a letter actually, not an email, but a letter in the mail from Rob from Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. And he told me how to pronounce Tamaqua, but I know that because I've been to Tamaqua. But anyway, he wrote a letter, and it mentions the Anabolic Warrior, as he used to be named back in the 80s Wrestling Observers. Dear Jim, I love hearing your tremendous mastery of all things that is classic pro wrestling. Your knowledge has enlightened the masses and gives hope that sports-based professional wrestling can still once again be a part of the fabric of Americana. It has even soothed my depression as several of the local prostitutes have left town and I am lonelier than usual. I'm sending you these paper towels, and actually inside the box with this letter were included 2 rolls of Bounty pick-a-size paper towels. So I thank you, Rob. I'm sending you these paper towels in hopes you'll read my question on air. Well, you see that it worked. And for the great knowledge you have given all of us. Your co-host, however, leaves much to be desired. He tries to be witty and often fails miserably. The very fact that his own podcasts usually run an average of 11 hours, 23 minutes, and 4 seconds proves his own unusual narcissism. I've repeatedly sent several pertinent, with a capital P, pertinent questions for you to answer, only to have them dismissed by Bryan Lost. To make matters worse, my questions have been replaced by those from Charlie of Ballsack, Mississippi. I have wanted to know for some time what you think of the following. Vince McMahon offered the Ultimate Warrior a contract in 1997, which is attached. What do you make of such an anomaly? I don't actually think that that's the right use of the word anomaly, but we're going to go with it. But he actually, and this gave me a fucking weird pop for a second, like I was getting some kind of goddamn deep throat communication. There is a carbon copy, as they used to say, a photocopy of the actual contract that Vince offered the Ultimate Warrior, Jim Hellwig, in December of 97 to try to get him to come back. He didn't. And then I realized this was in a lawsuit. So that's how he got it. But the point is, I have some of this stationery here in my files. It's on WWF stationery to Mr. Jim Hellwig, dated December 17, 1997. Right after Montreal, right? 6 weeks after Montreal. To Mr. Jim Hellwig at Ultimate Creations on North Scottsdale Road in beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona. Dear Jim, I am prepared to offer you the following. Term 5 years. Minimum guarantee. It says guaranteed, not guaranteed. Guaranteed. They were still typing these on actual typewriters back in those days. Compensation $750,000 plus royalties. Royalty rate. Royalties to be paid on a 35% basis. Everyone else is paid on 25%. That's not a parentheses from me. That's actually written here. Working days, 14 per month for everything. And the comment, Jim, this deal is far more lucrative to you than our last agreement of 1996 and obviously far more long-term. I look forward to building the resurgence of the Ultimate Warrior again. Sincerely, Vince. Do you remember, since you're a fucking savant, what lawsuit that this was a part of, which time that Hellwig sued him or how this came out? I've seen it before now that I've looked at it.
I could be wrong, but I think it may have been the lawsuit that came out of the release of the self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior DVD.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because then Warrior's side was trying to prove that, well, if he sucked so bad, as all of you said, then why did Vince offer him this deal? And the question that I cannot answer, for the first time in the history of the drive-thru, I've been asked a question I can't answer. I don't know why that Vince McMahon would have offered that piece of shit that much money to come back and make his life miserable again. It is a conundrum, an enigma, a mystery.
He was afraid he was going to go to WCW, which is what he did.
Did that? My God, that would have been like when fucking Bill Watts told Grizzly Smith, no, keep booking the opposition. I'll pay you some extra money to stay there because you're a rotten booker. And that's what happened. He went to WCW, made their life miserable, sapped them for some money, and sucked. You see how frustrating it is to be in Vince McMahon's orbit, because when all is well, he can be, as we've mentioned many times before, such a charming billionaire and fun to be in the presence of in some instances, but can also be fucking crazy. And for the same that he looks at people that obviously have talent and obviously you would want as part of your company, and he doesn't give a shit. He fixates on guys like this. And I know because he made this was his, I think even more than Hogan, this was his idea of what a wrestler should look like. And he gave the country and the world mass hysteria, or perpetrated mass hypnosis or whatever, for like that fucking, 2.5 year run of the Ultimate Warrior, where he was really fucking hot. Was it 3 years?
He was really hot, I would say, from late 88 until he left in 91.
Okay, whatever the fuck. And then there was Nostalgia, as we will recall, in 96, that lasted, about 2 TV appearances. And then the product had run off and left the Ultimate Warrior back in fucking ice cream bar land. He was the shits. He never tried to get any better. I've not made a secret that he was exactly why I always looked down on WWF wrestling in the 80s. And we never thought of going there, because if that's the fucking thing you're pushing, I don't want to be anywhere around it. And I thought they were fucking crazy when they brought him back in 96, and we talked about that recently, and he squashed Helmsley. I didn't understand anything that he fucking said. I didn't know why anybody would want to fucking deal with this head case. And I was the only one proving, everybody was, great, as Warriors back in the family. And I was the one proven right when 6 weeks later he was out of the fucking family and he's suing Vince again. And so, just buy 1 million of my comic books for $1 a piece and we'll call it even. And all that other shit. And then Vince is fucking freaking out. He's lost Brett, and he thinks the Warrior's going there, and I was already off the creative team, because you can tell this is December 17, 1997. I would bet that he had the idea to do this on December 16, 1997. But anyway, he fixed. I'm serious.
If he regretted Brett's contract, can you imagine what he would have felt like a day after, a week after, a month after Jim Hellwig signed that contract if he had?
I don't, he always thinks he can either handle these people or he can talk them into it or he's just got a blind spot or whatever. But it seems like he gives the best deals, best offers, and the most preferential treatment to the biggest head cases and the biggest pains in the ass. And so I cannot answer the question of why he would have done this. Obviously, the answer to the question is to keep him from going to WCW, but the answer to the question really is more complicated. Why the fuck would you want this motherfucker in your life? He still thought that he would be some kind of ratings draw for an opposition or for himself.
Can you imagine how different 98 would have been if you had the Warrior making that money? Obviously, he has to be in a top spot. The year you elevate Steve Austin.
Oh, good God.
It would have been a disaster.
You know what I'd like to have seen? That may have been another fucking case of Phil Hickerson meets Jim Hellwig if it was Steve Austin versus the Ultimate Warrior. Fucking Austin may have, I don't know if he'd have scoop slammed him to show him something. He would have stomped a good mud hole. That would have been Steve Austin's best looking fucking stomps. But anyway, the Phil Hickerson and Ultimate Warrior Hour. Nobody would know unless we did these programs that Phil Hickerson and Jim Hellwig's careers intersected as Phil was about out and Hellwig was just in, and ended up, I think Phil retired again the next year or something like that, and he's been successful as a matter of fact until recently.
He came back. No, P.Y. Chuhai.
That's right. He did the P.Y. Chuhai as the heel thing. Which was kind of a rib on Tojo because he used to work as P.Y. Chung.
Yeah.
and then retired. And I think he retired all the way here not long ago, but he's been doing radio in Jackson, Tennessee for years and years and years. And everybody in town loves Phil Hickerson. You know who everybody else in town loves?
Who's that?
Hot Rod, Rodney Estee. Happy belated birthday, Hot Rod. It was June the 13th, but we didn't broadcast on June 13th, so you're getting it now.
Happy birthday, Rodney.
Happy birthday, Hot Rod. He's probably, what is he? Is he 60 yet?
Hey.
I'll tell you.
Hey.
Anyway. Oh boy, I tell you, you know what? We talk about being old and being broken down, and I'm going to go out and do yard work. I know I'm going to be sore and creaking tonight with all of my various injuries, but you know what can help me get through the evening before I start Hell Week this week, Bryan? I'll tell you what it is. You don't even have to ask. It's the Omax, the Cryo Freeze. It's going to get me through everything, especially the roll-on, which, as I mentioned, along with Sport Cream, is my favorite. And after I get finished weeding and weed whacking and whacking off weeds and plummeting in the garden and tilling the soil and planting the seeds and watching them grow to the sky and carrying and toting things, then I'm going to come in tonight, I'm going to take me a hot shower, and I'm going to take that Omax Cryo Freeze roll-on and just go up and down all over my body, from top to bottom, from nose to toes, from tip to taint, because I'm going to be sore, but then I'm going to feel so much better. I'm going to be glowing, and I'm going to be cryo-froze, and I'm going to be pain-free, because that's what Omax Cryo Freeze does, folks. You just roll it over where it hurts and ice out the pain. No messy creams, horrible fragrances. It works within 10 minutes of application. And you can improve your physical training. Put it on before you work out. Put it on after you work out. Recovery, performance, it's all a part of the Omax Cryo Freeze benefits. Go to omaxhealth.com and enter the code DRIVE, because that's this show, DRIVE, to get 20% off not only the Cryo Freeze roll-on, but site-wide. As we've talked about it for months and months, this is the stuff that Bryan, myself, our families, our extended families, some of our lifelong friends and school chums, they all use this stuff because all of them are old and creaky. But anyway, you can block pain receptors, reduce inflammation, improve muscle and joint flexibility, and it's all natural. omaxhealth.com, enter code DRIVE, 20% off, save yourself some money and a big pain in the ass or wherever it may be paining you.
All right, well, we got some questions. It only took us an hour to get to them.
Are we still doing that kind of thing on this show?
We attempt to, but...
Hey, I got an email real quick.
Okay.
From, we talked about this guy on The Experience a couple of weeks ago. I just wanted to get this in. Hey, Mr. Cornette, I'm Matthew the fucking prick, who you cut a promo on The Experience last week after reading a somewhat pithy email I sent the week before. He asked me to cut a promo on him, so I did. In honor of that, I was going to order a Cult of Cornette membership certificate made out with my new moniker, but after your opening this week on the program, I changed my plans. Like you, I'm disgusted by what I've seen on television since George Floyd's murder. And, of course, this was The Experience from week before last. And as I listened to your opening this week and sat through the grinding 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence, I listened to it all and tried to think of what I could do since I'm already registered to vote and live in a state and city where the good guys already win. So, guess what he did, Bryan? He took the money for his Cornette's collectibles order that he was going to make and gave it to the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee to elect some Democrats in some underprivileged states that don't have as many as they should. And I cannot think of a better, if you don't want to send me money, then there's not a better way than to help some underprivileged states with a shortage of Democrats elect more of them. And as Matthew says, then we can get rid of some fucking Republicans. I just wanted to mention Matthew while I was looking at that.
All right, well, let's get to some questions.
You want to get to the questions now, don't you?
Well, we have a whole lot of them, so we have to tackle a good chunk of these here this week.
All right.
A lot of these are timely, and one that I'm sure you've seen a lot of people send in. We have received a ton of emails asking about your thoughts regarding Paul Heyman being removed from the executive creative director of Raw position, and now all creative being under Bruce Prichard.
Well, I pretty much said this was probably going to take place about a year ago, didn't I, when they started this whole thing? It started out with, who'd they start with? It was Heyman and
Bischoff.
Did they start with Heyman and Bischoff, and then Bruce took Bischoff's place when he fired him? Was that the way it went, or did they start? How did that work?
I believe that's the way the creative team worked, yeah.
Well, creative. I mean, they've still got a bunch of these fucking comedy writers. It's just there's supposed to be somebody that knows what the fuck they're doing in charge of it and being given some direction, I guess. But if anybody thinks that anything... First of all, Paul Heyman has not been booking or writing or whatever the term is, the show that he's in charge of to begin with. Not all the way, not 100%. He may be getting his ideas in. He may be featuring some people, but you know as well as I do, that is not a television program that Paul Heyman would write. It's what Vince wants that Paul can convince him of. Bischoff, from all accounts, really didn't ever do any work of any description. And if he was supposed to be in charge of his program as far as dealing with the network, well, he's a great guy to deal with the network, because he's charming and full of that John Davidson game show bullshit. But everybody who's ever been around him, that's the last thing you would want to do is give Eric Bischoff any responsibility for any creative, booking, etc., blah, blah, blah. Just have ideas to sound good to make executives happy that know less than he does. That's his strong point. So he was done from the start. Bruce, as I mentioned last year, is the guy that gets it, and it is what Vince McMahon wants. And Vince is going to be saying, they don't get it, pal. You get it. And Bruce will say, yes, absolutely. Vince, I'll give it to him. And then he'll go and he'll relay that information to Vince McMahon, or to the writers from Vince McMahon, because he gets it. And somehow everybody that heard that not everybody, but a lot of people that heard that commentary last year took it to meant that, well, Cornette says Bruce really gets it as far as creative. I didn't say that. I said Bruce gets what it is to Vince McMahon. So, and there was a great fucking meme that somebody tweeted. Bruce dressed up as the Grim Reaper with a fucking sickle, right? And there's an open door that says Eric Bischoff on it and a trail of blood out. And then an open door that says fucking Paul Heyman on it and a trail of blood out, and the blood leading to and he's knocking on Triple H's door. Well, he needs to knock longer because that door ain't going to get open. But that's the thing, Bruce. It's not that he won't argue with Vince. He will, in a non-aggressive or confrontational way, argue with Vince a different point or something that could be done, or try to talk him into something or whatever the fuck. But he ain't going to press anything to anybody's detriment, especially his own. And Paul would, as we mentioned, Bischoff would never really, from what we can tell, did any works. But Paul would die on some hills. But even then, it doesn't sound like there was any blow-ups. It's just that Paul's not just going to sit there and just, I don't think, nod like Bruce will. Well, now they say Vince doesn't like nodding. But he's not just going to sit there and take it. Like Bruce, in some instances, I remember he actually tried to convince me in a room with just the two of us in it that the Red Rooster was a good gimmick and it would have been great if Terry Taylor had done it right. Oh, and here's what it was going to be. And here's what it, and I said, you're fucking insane. But he wouldn't come. And when we brought Bill Irwin and Tony Anthony and Tracy Smothers and those guys in, Alex Porto, and they gave him all the stupid names and the stupid gimmicks. when I was looking at him like his head was on fire when he was telling me this, I was like, what the fuck? Well, Corny, they got to have some personality. I said, they do. The personality they've had since they got into business. This is fucking shit. And they were all doomed, but he said, well, they got to have some personality. You know, we got to bring them out. And what the fuck does that mean? But Vince will say the same things, and Bruce will like those things, and Bruce will convey those things to whoever that has to be conveyed to. So I figured that, you know, something like that was going to happen because of, I mean, it's not like Bruce had never been fired. They fired him a couple times before, but they're going to have to work real hard to figure out a reason this time, I bet you. And, you know, and probably the only one would be if he went knocking on Triple H's door. But it's just, that's what everybody's been talking about. Vince is more than ever convinced, I guess, that everybody else is just not getting it. So he needs somebody that can tell him what it is.
He needs an enabler, which is what Bruce is. Because Bruce is creatively bankrupt. He doesn't add anything to that. I'm sure you heard things. I've heard things.
Well,
I've seen Dave Meltzer write things that there weren't any positive reviews coming out of his runs in MLW or TNA, Impact, Global Force, whatever it was at that point.
Unfortunately, you can't fucking take Uncle Dave's word anymore since he's gone insane. But
I've heard the same thing.
Well, I've heard the same thing also, too, from actually being in those places.
Yeah.
But I just wouldn't, you know, fucking hang my hat on just Dave saying it. But the problem is I'm almost ready to break down and say that even Bruce Prichard, who grew up watching Paul Bosch's Houston wrestling, thinks this WWF style shit is good and always has, and wants more of it. And not even the fucking modern WWF style shit, but the fucking old WWF style shit that was shit then too. But he remembers it more fondly. And or more importantly, just whatever the fuck it is that Vince is thinking. And I don't know, since I haven't had a meaningful conversation with him in a long, long time, I don't know what the fuck Vince is thinking. But as the previous email about the Ultimate Warrior proved, I didn't know what the fuck Vince was thinking 23 years ago. You can't predict that.
Well, one thing we could say for certain from watching the bits of TV we've watched over the last several months, Vince doesn't understand how to put on a good television product in 2020. And there needs to be change. There needs to be radical change there to keep up with the times. And it's not happening with Vince on top. It's not going to happen with Bruce Prichard as Vince's conduit to talent, who already, in a lot of cases, think very low of Bruce Prichard. I think Paul Heyman was doomed to fail in that position. There was no way he was going to succeed in that. Paul Heyman, if you're a fan of Paul Heyman's style of wrestling, that only worked when Paul Heyman had full control.
Yeah.
I'm not saying whether it's good or bad. I'm saying, you know, when Dixie Carter wanted Paul Heyman wanted control. He wasn't just going to go in there and...
Well, no. Paul Heyman figured out a way to be the babyface in the situation and still refused to jump on the sinking ship. He saw... Paul's smart, especially where it comes to the way he looks to people on the outside. He knew that there was no way that even he could do anything with that as long as Dixie was the owner and certain other things were not going to change, such as every other employee in the office practically. So he gave them the only offer that he knew they would refuse, which was, you got to give me a piece of ownership. That way, the heat was on them for turning him down, but he didn't want to go there anyway. He didn't want full control, because even full control of the wrestling side could not have saved TNA. But yes, the only way that Paul's stuff works, and he does genius stuff, you know, as well as the fucking ridiculous shit, but he's got to have full control. The only way most great bookers, the only way my shit would have worked in OVW, which was the best booking I've ever done in my life, was that I had full control until the end, when they started fucking with me from Stamford and I didn't have full control in terms of people that were coming and going without my knowledge, or people that were being exposed on other television programs. The only way, do you think Bill Watts' Mid-South Wrestling run as a whole, even though he had different bookers, would have been the same as if he had not been the constant hand on the wheel and people were doing his style of shit? You need almost total control over what goes on your television for professional wrestling booking to be great. And if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how good the individuals are on the committee, has been proven 20 million times. It's still not going to be real good, and possibly it's going to be the shits. So, but anyway, but yes, and Paul was doomed from the start because he wouldn't have full control. And eventually somebody was going to have to get fired if shit didn't get better. And then if you especially look between Bruce and Paul, which one is Vince going to fucking fire? Because he don't like Paul to begin with.
And Vince may have some short-term memory problems, but he remembers long-term. So he remembers, oh, Bruce, I remember him.
Yeah, Bruce, yeah. But you know what? Here, Travis, attention. Here's your fucking thumbnail. I can see it now. There's Vince in 10 years. He's fucking 85. He's in a fucking wheelchair. He's all shriveled up. He's got a fucking blanket over him. And he's sitting, Bruce is 70 or whatever the fuck. And he's sitting right next to him. And they're at Vince's dining room table in Greenwich. And Vince is going, so Billy, you remember when we had all the wrestlers in the world, don't you, Billy? And Bruce is going, yes, I do, Grandpa, and it's Bruce, not Billy. That's right, Billy.
See, he wouldn't do that. He would accept that he's now Billy.
Well, that's true.
You can call me Billy.
You can call me Billy. You can call me Al. You can call me Billy. Whatever the case may be.
Well, this is a bad sign, though, for WWE television, I have to say.
Well, I mean, it's not like any of this shit's going to be.
You look for signs of hope, and this is the exact opposite of that.
I started to say it's not going to be like any of this shit's going to be worth a fuck anyway until there's people back in the audience. But then it wasn't really, some of it wasn't worth a fuck when the people were in the audience. So I got news for you. I think they've jumped they've jumped the shark or the cow or whatever you have to jump, where nobody's going to take any of this seriously anymore. There's been too many fucking football field and Titan Tower scramble matches and fucking bullshit. What they're showing them during this pandemic with either the empty buildings or the cinematic matches, I don't know whether they're going to be able to get people to come back live when they actually can come back or not.
Well, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru.
I mean, hey, here's the thing. If the only thing that the fucking TV show is promoting is goddamn cinematic matches, well, a ticket to the fucking movies costs $10. Ticket to goddamn WWE costs about 40 or whatever. I ain't gonna goddamn buy a $40 ticket to see a fucking movie, even if they were acting it out live in front of me.
Our next question sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Austin Pollard. With Vince's health in question, I'm curious as to why everyone thinks that Triple H will be the one to take command. Wouldn't Vince pass it down to Stephanie, or now that Shane is back in the fold, to him? Do you think that he would ever announce a successor, or keep it private in his will? Is this something that investors would have a say in if they weren't confident in the choice?
Okay, there was a variety of questioning there. An interrogation, literally. The point is, it's obvious, and that's the way it's being set up. Shane is a great kid. Well, he's a great guy now. He's not a kid. He's almost 50 or whatever. He didn't have the wrestling mind. He had the desire and the passion for it, but he didn't have the wrestling mind. But he's gone out and he's done his own shit. He's the one that wanted Vince to buy the fucking UFC, which, in a way, it's probably best that didn't happen because, I think Dana White's probably done a better job with it than Vince would have. But Shane had the desire and had the energy for it, but I don't think he was the wrestling mind. And for whatever reason, Vince decided that Stephanie should be in charge of creative when she graduated college. And I don't know why. She had no experience in writing or booking wrestling. But when you look at who needs to be the next Vince McMahon, look at Triple H, whether you like him or not. He's been a wrestler now for fucking 30 years. He's worked with every top guy. That old line where I said Triple H is the guy that works with the guy that draws you money. Well, he worked with every single guy that ever drew Vince money for the last 20 years. He's a student of the business, as they say. He obviously has gotten the fucking political part down pat and knows how to work with talent, talk to talent, and get talent to do things. He's the closest thing to the next Vince McMahon. To suggest that Stephanie should suddenly take over just because she's his biological daughter is ridiculous. As far as qualifications of personal experience, Triple H is probably the only fucking guy in the world that is adequately prepared to do this, except for Vince at this point. Wouldn't you think?
In that company, I would certainly think.
Yeah, well, and see, in that company means the only guy in the business, because I don't even care if you've been in wrestling or worked in wrestling for any other company, even New Japan. I won't even say AEW. That would be ridiculous at this stage of the game. I think everybody realizes it's not like they have a fucking several-story tower with hundreds and hundreds of employees in AEW. Unless you have worked in the WWE system, the company, and know how it works, and the various fucking satellite offices and the performance center and who does what in that company, you're not ready to do anything at a high level in the WWF. It's a whole nother world. And so nobody is prepared. It's like Triple H has been the vice president for 8 years. Nobody else is as prepared and knowledgeable to be the vice president as the vice president, or to be the president as the vice president. Usually, whether they're the most electable or the ones that get elected or not is a different story. But for experience, for knowing who does what, Triple H has been there for 20 fucking years. He's in the family, so it's not like he just has meetings on office time with Vince and etc. They're together outside. He has been completely immersed in whatever he would need to do to run that company for 20 years, and he's a smart fucking guy. So nobody else is even close. If you want to see the fucking stock market crash, hey, Bruce Prichard, Vince is dead. Bruce is the new fucking CEO or the head guy or whatever. Fucking people would have whiplash turning their head to sell their fucking stock. And nobody on the company side could possibly run the wrestling, and nobody on the wrestling side could possibly understand the complexity of that company, the business end.
Vince is surrounded right now by Bruce Prichard and Kevin Dunn. Not very high on Stephanie and Triple H's favorite employees list. Vince has done increasingly stupid things in the last decade plus, especially in the short term, the last few years. Triple H is losing in a ratings war with AEW, although it's a war which some weeks it's a very slim victory for AEW, and then of course there's the key demos, that's another argument. Can you see Vince doing something stupid again and bypassing Triple H somehow?
No, because Triple H is not losing to AEW. The developmental program is losing to AEW. Triple H has been bulletproof in this whole thing. He's got the program that is universally praised, if any of them under the WWE umbrella are, for being the best wrestling program. He's had a hand in fostering all the new talents, so all of them that are brought up to the main roster, allegedly, are all going to be pretty much loyal or beholden to him. He's helped them in some way, and as that turnover becomes complete, he'll have been responsible for filling the whole fucking talent roster. So he's got the boys. He's got the fans who like the wrestling program. To his father-in-law, he can say, well, boy, we've taken these kids that have never been on TV before and out of wrestling school, and we're almost beating the opposition. Dad? And Vince can see that in that respect and say, of course. And, that's why you've got the important job there, Trip. He has set himself up in a way where he can look good. And also, to be quite honest, he should look good next to all the rest of these numbnutses populating this fucking universe. But no, he has almost no downside. If he loses the ratings war against the opposition, it's the wrestling school, the developmental program losing the ratings war. Meanwhile, everybody on the internet saying the developmental program is the best wrestling show and has the best wrestlers, and Triple H is responsible for better than half and soon to be 100% in however many years of the entire fucking roster. So, wouldn't you know who won the pony?
Well, there's a chance, I guess, that some shareholders would be upset about all this, and they may look to potentially get a class action suit of some sort or some sort of lawsuit against Vince McMahon and WWE. What do you think of that?
Well, I'll tell you right now that would be a fruitless task, because I cannot think of anyone in the world that could take down the might of Jerry McDevitt and the legal team that protects Vince McMahon and the WWE. I can't think of a single solitary name of anyone who could possibly bring those people to justice for perpetrating crimes against professional wrestling. Why, if I racked my brain, maybe there's one, maybe there's just one around the world, one man who could bring to justice even someone as powerful as the Walt Disney of wrestling.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. He'll sue the rest.
You know what I would like to see? I'd like to see Jerry McDevitt and Stephen P. New chained together, left wrist to left wrist, with an 8-foot chain. The only way to win the match is to drag the opposing barrister, the opposing attorney, and touch all four corners of the courtroom, and then the judge declares the winner. I think that, Brian Last, would be something to behold, because only a bulldog of the legal jurisprudence like Stephen P. New could bring down one of these big corporations. He's done it before. He's sued all these companies. He's sued Amazon. He's sued General Motors. He's sued the big pharmaceutical companies. He'll sue you too if you get out of line, because Stephen P. New brings perpetrators to justice and yanks a knot in the tail of people who try to downtrod the little guy. NewLawOffice.com, 888-692-8084. Whether you want to sue your local outlaw mud show for impersonating wrestlers, or whether you really have been harmed by some malfeasance or greed on the part of a major corporation, you can be compensated, you can be rectified, and the perpetrators can be brought to justice, thanks to the consigliere of the cult of Cornette himself, Stephen P. New.
Well, speaking of outlaw mud shows, let's get another question here on the show. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Kevin in Orlando, a popular topic that many have sent in.
Oh, Kev down in Orlando.
Hey, Jim, don't know if you saw this. Howard Stern apparently brought up Gold Dust on a recent episode of his show and asked what happened to him. Someone said he wrestles for AEW, and when Howard asked what that was, co-host Robin Quivers said, "It's a backyard wrestling league. He wrestles in people's backyards." Has anything ever been so accidentally correct?
Oh, and you know, there's a line here, because to be honest, except that I know that he's on the air somewhere, I couldn't find Howard Stern now with a goddamn map and directions. He's not on radio anymore. He's doing satellite, or he's doing a podcast, or he's doing something. What's he doing?
Satellite radio. He's been doing that for about 15 years now, making a fortune.
Well, I'm sure he is, but still, it's not like in the old days when he was on every morning radio show that in every town that you would just turn on and you knew where to find him, right? He's become one of those institutions, but he ain't red hot. He's just still smoldering. But this is the fucking problem, and I love Dustin, and he's doing his best work of his career now, unfortunately, in those surroundings. But even I know that AEW is not backyard wrestling, but how do you think that Robin Quivers did one of the producers fucking real quickly while they were talking about it, Google Dustin Rhodes, and they saw him get, in a fucking, was he on the football field, or was he in one of these hallway fucking fights that they've done, or one of these cinematic things they've done to where you would think that he's just wrestling in somebody's backyard?
Actually, I have a quote here from The Observer, if I could read it. While to expect Howard Stern to know wrestling when he never did before, his comments do indicate how AEW has not penetrated into the non-wrestling world. On June 8th, Stern on his show started talking about Goldust, and they played the tape when he was doing the Tourette's gimmick, which wasn't exactly the best, but Stern liked it.
Wonder why.
Stern said that Goldust was the greatest wrestling character, and asked whatever happened to him. Robin Quivers noted that pro wrestling repackages people, and he may not have done well after that. Then a staffer gave Stern a note. Stern said the note says that Goldust now wrestles in AEW. Stern asked what AEW is. Quivers said it was a backyard wrestling federation, and he's now wrestling in backyards. Stern thought that was such a shame.
But okay, here let's suppose this. Let's suppose that the name Chris Jericho came up, because obviously Howard Stern is not fucking living his life around the comings and goings and doings in the wrestling world. He wasn't up on this, so let's assume that he obviously knows who Chris Jericho is. But he said, hey, I wonder, on his show sometime, I wonder what happened to Chris Jericho. And of course, he's got producers in his control room that are going to fucking start trying to find anybody he's talking about. That's the way radio works, right? Or something on anything, or something to blah, blah, blah. See, we have to just do this shit on our own. We're entertaining you and me, Bryan, just the two of us. But these big shows, they got these fucking producers and things. What are the chances if you just typed Chris Jericho into something that he'd come up on the football field, having the goddamn line drawn over him in the greatest wrestling match ever held? And then this producer, who don't know dick all about wrestling as much as Howard Stern does, would go, oh, apparently he's now with a wrestling company where they fucking dress up in football pads and do comedy skits on the fucking field. You don't know who that's not keeping up with what's going on, just because we all do, because we all live our life around wrestling. Everybody in the world doesn't, including a lot of people who used to like it or used to watch it more regularly. So now you see, well, I used to love so-and-so. I wonder what he's doing. And you'd see the fucking Matt Hardy coming out of the ice machine, or Jericho getting the fucking line drawn from his crotch to his fucking lips, or any of the other stupid shit that recognized talent is involved with now. And you would think, well, they've left what I remember to be the big leagues of the WWE that does WrestleMania in stadiums, and now they're doing fucking, cable access shit.
But it says a lot about AEW's, the lack of awareness of AEW amongst people who aren't in the wrestling bubble right now.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Nobody outside the wrestling bubble knows who the fuck AEW. It's not a big deal because so many people have moved on from wrestling because it has been so fucking silly and stupid and fake for so long. So now you're left with in AEW's case, 500,000 people that like silly, stupid, fake fucking wrestling, that they're in their echo chamber. And the WWE's left with a couple of million people that like the WWE because that's all they've known of wrestling for 20 years, even though it sucks. There's an abusive relationship there. We don't want to end it, but because we really like wrestling, but goddamn, this program hadn't been good in a while. And the more that these guys that do have names and can somehow get publicity for themselves do stupid bullshit like this, the more it comes up that instead of seeing someone in a ring winning a belt, even before, when there were fans in the audience, there was a lot of people there, whatever, they're seeing fucking even stars supposedly doing stupid shit in front of no fucking people and not even in a ring in half the time, half the cases. That's not the way you get the entire wrestling business over. None of this stuff that they're doing at AEW is going to revolutionize wrestling by getting anybody to watch that wasn't already fucking watching and dedicated to watching to begin with. They don't even have all of the goddamn casual people that just kind of watch WWE because they think that's what wrestling is supposed to be. There's no fucking revolution going on here. I thought there might be a revolution with Ring of Honor when we went to all guys beating the piss out of each other as high-level trained fucking athletes, the Davey Richards and Roderick Strongs and Eddie Edwardses and et cetera, et cetera. But if it would have worked, we needed more time for it and a better launch at the beginning. But I don't even think anymore at this point that it would have worked because so many people have shit on the business for so long and done stupid, silly outlaw shit that the people that would have taken it seriously have just given up and moved away from wrestling completely. And so you got a couple million that like the WWE still because it really is not very good, but it probably will be again sometime. And you got 500,000 that like silly fucking stupid goof wrestling because they've never seen it done right. And you've got, 6 or 8 million? But conservatively, they were watching 20 years ago when people were really fucking kicking ass and fucking taking names and wonder why the fuck it ain't like that anymore. Oh, it's because now it's all silly and fake and they're all small children. So I don't expect anybody to even know it. I don't expect Howard Stern to know the current WWE talent. I don't expect anybody in the mainstream media to know any of the current WWE talent because there's not any stars amongst them. Past John Cena, if you can call him still current, nobody does because nobody's watching this shit anymore because they've fucking hokied and pokeyed it up to the point where only the fucking Twitter audience that likes 24 hours of and wants to watch this shit. Because we got too many Twinkle Toes McFinger Bangs and not enough Phil Hickersons.
I told you we had a party here several months back, and I was talking to someone because that was the night of an AEW pay-per-view, and I had to watch it because we were reviewing it on this show or The Experience. I forget which one. And one of our friends was hanging out with me on the couch in the den, and he said, "Is that Goldust?" I said, "Yeah, he wrestles here now." He had no idea what AEW was. Big fan from the Attitude Era. Had no idea what any of this was. Was surprised that Goldust was happy that Goldust was still around, but was surprised that Goldust was there. Had never heard of AEW, and that's one of the points that we kind of make, although you may sprinkle it with a lot of other stuff.
Well, here, I'll make this point. The point is, for the past 15 years, when I go to Fan Fest, Legends reunions, comic conventions that don't even have anything mainly to do with wrestling, when I go to a large public gathering, people say to me, I used to love to watch wrestling. I don't anymore. And it's so because it got too fake, silly, scripted. You can tell they don't mean it. However they say it, that's the reason they give. And that is in a wrestling fan fest. It's about half and half. And at a comic convention, it's 95. I used to watch wrestling and love it and don't anymore, to 5. Oh, I still watch wrestling. And these idiots who think that they have somehow reinvented the wheel and revolutionized the business with their silliness, that they have convinced the fans who like that type of thing that it is actually successful when you can look at every business metric and statistic and determine that it's not. Because if it was successful in revolutionizing the business and reinventing the wheel, then there would be a lot more people watching wrestling. What you have is the people who are left watching wrestling happen to like that shit. So they make a lot of noise. But unfortunately, these what do they call it? The silent majority of the difference between 2 million people on Monday night and 10 million people on Monday night has not been. It's not like those people check the fucking news every morning like they check the weather report on whether a new wrestling program has come on the air that will be wrestling like I used to like it, when they actually meant it and they really tried to make it real. They watch the fucking weather forecast because they know it's either going to rain or sunshine on them every fucking day. But they've long since given up trying to find wrestling promotions because they don't think it's ever going to fucking happen again. And and then, to be perfectly honest, the only reason that 10 million people on Monday nights was a big fucking deal was because it was 10 million people at the same time on the same day watching the same show. Because if you go back to the territory days of the 60s and 70s and 80s, then at least 2 or 3 times that many people were watching wrestling because of all the regional programs on broadcast television, the strongest form of communication at the time, in every major market on a weekly basis, and lack of cable so that people were watching one of 3 or 4 stations. A wrestling program in a shitty territory and a weak station was still doing fucking a 20 share. And that was bad for wrestling in those days. So you can talk about 25 million people every week watching some form of wrestling on television. Or you can go back to the 50s when the first network TV boom came and fucking Vern Gagne and Gorgeous George and Hans Schmidt and Luthez and a couple other guys, depending on what year it was, were one of the 5 highest paid professional athletes in any sport in the United States of America. And that fucking United States title from the Marigold Arena was being seen by 30-something million people or more every fucking week. Because it was network, and there were only 2 of them at that point. So no, they haven't reinvented anything. They've just done some shit to milk the fucking most susceptible dumb fucks amongst them into making some noise, and that's what they then claim, oh, well, they want this silly shit. It's what Road Warrior and his brother Balding, the Bucks, they think that because they're in that group of people who, for those who kind of people who like that kind of thing, that's the kind of thing those kind of people like, they think they've reinvented something. Or Olivier is emoting and spreading his art all over the canvas. He spreads his art all over the ring like a pervert, spreads his sperm all over the floor of a peep show. And they just, all the people that are there to watch it just cream over it. But meanwhile, the building is half empty, and they used to be running bigger buildings. Don't give me the fucking COVID joke. I'm talking about when we can have people, we could have people. Everybody for the last 20 years has been insisting that wrestling has to get more entertaining to survive, and every time it gets more entertaining, fewer people watch it. I'm done with that question.
Well, Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
In a recent interview, Luke Gallows claimed that the Bullet Club is the only reason AEW exists and was the driving force behind the revamping of NXT. Gallows said, quote, "The fucking Bullet Club revolutionized professional wrestling, and if someone hears this and they are mad at me, sorry, fight me on it. If there's no Bullet Club, there's no AEW. If there's no Bullet Club, there really is no reason to have an NXT." End quote. What are your thoughts on Gallows' take on the Bullet Club's influence on pro wrestling?
Well, I agree and disagree. I agree if there was no Bullet Club, there'd be no AEW. I disagree there would be no NXT. NXT, it was always going to happen sooner or later, especially when Triple H got involved, but it was they've had a developmental program, obviously, for 20 years since OVW. And so it's just a natural extension that was going to happen. I don't see where he's making that connection. However, with AEW, yes, definitely, because the Bullet Club, that's why I don't know the entire talent roster, the list of members that have gone through the Bullet Club, but the Young Bucks were originally like an add-on, the kind of like the flunky group when the NWO got too busy and too many people in it, right?
Yeah, originally it was Carl Anderson, Doc Gallows, Bad Luck Fale, and I think Prince Devitt. I think that was the original crew. And then when Devitt left,
the modern day Finn Balor.
That's right.
And then AJ.
And then AJ replaced him, and then they really started expanding the group pretty rapidly, just letting anyone in. And by the way, I do think you could certainly argue about the influence of the T-shirts, but the act itself, I thought copying the click hand signal and doing the too sweet and the crowd, just pretty lame, copying things from 20 years earlier that were kind of lame back then.
Well, but I'm not even going to litigate that. But what I'm saying is that Anderson and Gallows, I didn't know whether it was Finn first or AJ first, whatever the fuck. But the point is, those guys were all top guys that were featured as top guys within New Japan Pro Wrestling. Then they started losing people and had to fill in their Bullet Club. And wasn't that where Twinkle Toes McFinger Bang got his bang bang good night or whatever the fuck, until we meet again, good night and have a pleasant tomorrow, whatever his fucking sign off was. But the Bullet Club shirts were cool and got in stores. Didn't mention one goddamn wrestler's name. Yes, they did have individual wrestler shirts, but the big shirt was the Bullet Club with the cool logo, and people thought, oh, fucking bullets, guns, whatever the fuck. It's cool. It's a logo. It's a black shirt. The original Bullet Club was definitely over in New Japan, and they were all fucking talent, and it fit. And they got the Bullet Club brand over. And then it started spreading to, when they started opening up the membership and then replacing people, and other people got involved with it and just picked up on it. But and because Tony Khan was a Japanese wrestling mark among many other kinds of mark, they're seeing the shirts, whether they have anything to do with fucking Road Warrior and his brother balding or not. And they like that shit. And that's what led to AEW. That I can see. The NXT thing, not so much, because there was always going to be that program eventually.
Yeah, and you got to remember, too, when all those shirts started ending up in Hot Topic, that was mostly because of the popularity of the Bullet Club shirts. And we had a letter from someone a while back on this show that they were at a party and someone was wearing a Bullet Club shirt. And they went over to him thinking they could talk about wrestling, and the guy's like, no, I just like guns.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It was like the people at Hot Topic didn't have to know. That's like Robin Quivers didn't have to know where fucking Dustin Rhodes was. People at Hot Topic don't have to know anything about wrestling. Oh, Bullet Club, that's cool. Looks like a shirt. So, but yes, I'm not saying they didn't sell a ton of shirts, but that more than anything led to AEW and to the influence that ridiculous group of fucking cartoon characters has had on the wrestling profession so far, which has been mostly negative in my estimation. But for the people who like that kind of thing, they love it. But as we just talked about here a little earlier, there ain't that many of them. But, so I agree with Brother Luke on part of that, definitely. And they were obviously, and they were the best looking Bullet Club because those guys looked like something. And then here comes, you know what? It reminds me of every time I see this episode. Have you seen the South Park episode where the overall story is the fact that everybody in town is now working at the Amazon fulfillment center, and that Amazon and Bezos is taking over their lives and et cetera, whatever the fuck. But the sub story is that the boys are finally all getting together to compete in the big bike race, the big bike rally. And they have all their tricked out bikes with all the bling on it and the flags and everything. And they end up even though the Amazon workers are on strike, the kids get their Amazon deliveries so they can trick out their bikes because they find a way to get Amazon new employees. They go to the mall where all the zombies live, the zombies that used to work at all the stores at the mall that nobody goes to. But anyway, when I see them riding those bikes up with those flags and all the bling on it, that to me is how that Matt and Nick Jackson should come to the ring. On kids tricked out bikes with the flags on them and the colored bling and the playing cards and the spokes to make the noise and everything. And little ding ding, you know, the little bing bing bells that they have on them, or maybe something like that. I don't know, whatever the fuck. Because that's what they look like. They look like kids pedaling to the playground on their little bicycles to fucking have wrestling matches. You know what? That's the reason why, Brian, that I have not ridden a bicycle in 30 years or more. 40 years probably.
Wow.
You know why?
No.
Because you have to pedal the fucking things. And that's hard. But you know what? Now that's no longer a problem. Have you heard about this, Brian? Have you read about this? The Rad Power Bikes.
Yeah.
Rad, R-A-D, Rad Power Bikes. Folks, they now have electric bikes. And you don't have to pedal them. And, you know, that's why, because I got a lot of hills around me, and I don't want to have a stroke or nothing. And I live pretty far out from anything that I would want to walk to. So naturally, I always drive. But if you get one of these power bikes, it's better for the environment, doesn't use gas, they're electric, and you don't have to pedal. So if you want to get around town or get around your neighborhood or whatever, and you want to avoid public transportation, and don't we all, I bet this would be good in New York City, because I see all those schmoes on those bikes you got to pedal on those streets, and I'm like, boy, if they get 20, 25 blocks away from fucking home, they're fucked. And then how are you going to get back?
And then the thing goes like 20 miles per hour, so it's pretty brisk.
Yes, according to electricbikereview.com, I didn't even know that was a thing, but it apparently is. They were voted the best affordable electric bike in 5 categories, the largest electric bike brand in North America. And as you just mentioned, you can go up to 20 miles an hour without pedaling. So instead of getting out there and getting all sweaty, ride in comfort with a Rad Power Bike. And I bet you didn't know this, but you can save some money thanks to us. These things are affordable. As a matter of fact, these other e-bikes can cost twice as much as a Rad Power Bike. And you can even haul groceries. You can even put strap one of your kids to your back. Take him out on a fucking ride. And well, even that, go out on a ride, strap your kid in at home where he can't leave so you don't have to watch him. And you go out on a ride by yourself, and that way, it'll calm your nerves. Anyway, you can save some money with us because Rad Power Bikes offer flexible financing for as low as 0% APR. And right now, as a limited time offer, you can get a free accessory with the purchase of a bike. That's worth up to $100 in value as a free gift and free shipping, at least to the contiguous 48 states. But to get this special offer, you know what you got to do? It's different. It's different than what we normally tell you. You don't have to go to a website. You've got to text. Text the word Jim, J-I-M, to 64,000. Jim to 64,000. You cannot believe. Let me say that one more time. Text Jim to 64,000, 64000. You cannot imagine how brilliant this is, that I actually now am a word that you can text to get something when I've never sent a text in my life. That's cool. That you can actually text my name now to this number, 64000, 64,000, and you can fucking get a free gift and free shipping. And I've never even sent a text in my life. Don't know how to do it. Couldn't do it with a gun to my head. Anyway, Rad Power Bikes. Somebody get one and let me know what you think of it, because I'm telling you, I'm thinking I'm liking this idea. I can get further. I can go farther. I can transport things without even breaking a sweat. and just then plug it in. Just plug it in.
All right, well.
What do you got?
We got some more questions here on the show, Jim. This next one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Matt in Morristown. Jim Ross recently called Tony Khan AEW stalwart of creative and mentioned as Khan gets more experience, the shows will get better. Being the head of creative and on-the-job training shouldn't go hand in hand for a major promotion. What say you, Jim?
Well, I say same thing. Yeah, but that's like, well, yeah, he's never done it before, so it can't get any worse. That's basically what that statement is. As he gets more experience, the show will get better is a nice way of saying it can't get any worse, I would think. As someone does something more and more often, one tends to get better at it, but that's not even guaranteed. So I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belabor this guy any more than I've already belabored him. But this is just, it's the same thing when they hire these fucking nitwits that have writing credits for television to be on the WWE creative team, or the independent promotions where the guy's a big fan, so naturally he thinks he's going to be the booker when he starts his own promotion. And then, you know, after that, maybe he'll become a double knot spy and an astronaut. You can't do this shit. Even at a small time, at a local level, you're not going to be any good the first time you do something. So everybody's saying, well, you know, they've watched wrestling or followed wrestling for so long that they know better than the people that are writing it. Well, unfortunately, in this day and age, yeah, that statement can be true, but that doesn't mean that they're still any good at it either. The people who did this for a living and were successful for years and years and decades started out in minor roles in professional wrestling and progressed. Most guys that became bookers had been talents, not all of them. But most guys had been. You become a wrestler. Then you get a good mind for your finishes. Then you get a good mind for other people's finishes. Then you get the chance to be an assistant somewhere. Then you work your way. Then a small territory might take a chance on making you booker. Or you work with other fucking veterans as you go up, etc. If you've been a manager, that's the same thing. Referee, some referees have been bookers, but same thing. They started out hauling the fucking ring. And then they had a little input, and then they worked with some veterans, and over years they got the hang of it, and then finally they got their spot as a booker. And then if they had no success at it, they probably never got another chance. And the ones that did have success went on to do it in other different places. I don't care how much I've watched Family Guy on television. I'm not going to write an episode and submit it to them thinking that it is good enough to be on the Fox network. And just because people watch fucking cop shows, although Cops just got canceled, there's that, but that doesn't mean they know how to fucking turn the siren on if they're sitting in the squad car. That doesn't mean that it's impossible for anybody to learn, but you can't just assume because you have watched something done and had an opinion on it for years and years that you can actually do it when you're put in that position. And then when you find out everything that you don't know. Because whenever you enter a venture, there's a lot of things that you don't know. And guess what? You don't know what you don't know until you find out. Oh, that makes it harder. Oh, that makes it tougher. So we're in a situation now in the business where the head of creative of the WWE, the biggest company in the world, has been in the business for 35 fucking years, but he's never been responsible for anything on his own, and he's generally known for agreeing with Vince a lot. And not to say that Bruce doesn't come up with any ideas of his own, for fuck's sake, of course not, but it's all in the style of the shit that the WWF used to do fucking 20 years ago, because that's what he thinks is good. But even then, he's never booked anything on his own. And at the same time, so you've got 35 years of experience at one thing, which is, and maybe way too much at this point. And the other fucking program has a guy who's been doing it for 6 months. I don't know who to feel sorrier for.
Well, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Sean Davis. Recently, Arn Anderson was asked which wrestlers would make great agents. Arn proceeded to mention Daniel Bryan, Edge, and Robert Roode as possible great agents.
Yeah.
However, when asked about Sami Zayn, Arn's answer was a quick, emphatic no. His reasons were that Sami is too headstrong and that he lacks the patience and creativity for that position. Arn also mentioned how he and Sami would clash quite a few times when he was in WWE. Do you agree with Arn Anderson's opinions?
Wow.
Also, who do you think would make a great agent?
Well, once again, it's nice to know that some of my previous opinions have been validated by other people. That was a nice way of saying you can't fucking get this guy to stop arguing about the goddamn, fucking what you're going to have for lunch to determine whether or not the whole group is going to starve or not. He's on minute little details that he won't fucking let go. He's a pain in the ass. And as an agent, my God, he's an agent's worst nightmare because I've tried to agent him. And I believe I've mentioned this all these times. Besides the fucking, goofy gimmick that he had in Ring of Honor, he and Steen were the two that you spent all your fucking time on. The only thing that I was popping on there was that would anybody offer up the name of Sami Zayn to be an agent? Why the fuck would that be happening? Daniel Bryan, actually, he's worked all over the world. He's worked every style. He's fucking devoted his life to the business. He studies it. Everybody likes him and respects him. He works well with other people. He's a good teacher. That's perfect. Robert Roode, you could say the fucking same thing. His work has always been impeccable. He gets along with everybody. He can instruct well. I used to watch him with some of the guys who were quite a bit greener in TNA, and he could, lead them through or make them understand or whatever the fuck. Who was the other name mentioned in that group?
Robert Roode, Daniel Bryan, and
Edge. Yes, for all the same reasons. And then you've got, Sami Zayn, indie-rific. I love it. He's a great promo, as we've talked about. The fucking mute babyface luchador that I had suddenly becomes a fucking classic heel promo. Imagine that. He's a great heel promo because he's a personable but annoying fucker in person. And, he came straight off the Independence where he had to do his shit and he had to die on every hill and he couldn't fucking understand why he and Steen weren't getting all my praises when they were doing their erector set matches with all the ladders and chairs and tables and bullshit when I was trying to sell a fucking pro wrestling UFC cross offshoot to fucking Sinclair Broadcasting. No, he wouldn't be good in any respect because he's worked all over the world on indie shows doing the same indie shit. And they calmed him down a little bit since he's been there, and they took the mask off of him, and suddenly he becomes a fucking great promo. But I wouldn't want him fucking agenting matches. He would probably have all the guys up in fucking arms or goddamn ready to hang themselves in their closets.
What about Kevin Owens?
Some people do for themselves. That's why Nightmare Danny Davis was not the main event wrestler in the world's biggest territory because of his size, even though his work was impeccable, but he was an incredible trainer. Ric Flair was one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, but he couldn't really tell you. And that's why the only person he ever trained was Stan, which consists of training at Flair's gym and locking up in the backyard, and then he sent him to fucking Amarillo. But Flair could just do it, but he couldn't teach because it just came naturally to him. And as some people, the most coaches of pro sports teams are not the star players. They're the guys who got everything, but were not outstanding athletes, but got the mental picture. Some guys need to take care of their own shit. They get over. Some guys can branch out and take care of a lot of people's shit. I wouldn't put Steen and Zayn in, or Owens and Zayn, or Owens and Steen, or whatever names they're going under these days. I wouldn't put them in that category of people that ought to be in charge of other people's matches.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Big from the Sticks, a longtime fan. A few years ago, someone asked a question on the show, Jim, about Vince versus Bischoff in a fight, and you said that Vince would destroy Eric Bischoff. You offhandedly mentioned that Bischoff's karate skills didn't help him when Ric Flair took him down and went for his eyes. I have not heard you mention it prior or since. What's the story behind that fight?
Oh, geez, I thought everybody knew that to begin with. That's why I didn't go into more detail when I mentioned that. It was after Bischoff had, how can I tell this story to bring it up to date? Ric Flair had not been being used. It was one of the periods where he wasn't being used on television, whatever the fuck they were trying to kill him in the booking. And that was when Reed was wrestling for the state title, right? Or some regional tournament in his amateur wrestling. And Flair was going to be there to see the big match. Well, then they called Flair and said he had to be a TV. And he said, well, I'm not going to be a TV. I'm going to be seeing my son wrestle his big championship match. And I've been at these other TVs and blah, blah, blah. So Bischoff, that's where, and correct me if I'm wrong on this timeline, Bryan, since you remember everything. That's where Bischoff had the meeting of all the talent where he said that he was going to sue Flair into the poorhouse and blah, 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 right? Basically buried him.
Yeah, there was another meeting, too, I think, where he said the only people in this room who've ever drawn money are Hogan and Savage, and maybe he said Piper. But, like, you know, there's
Yeah, it was Hogan, Savage, and Piper while Flair was in the room, but that was a different instance. But the point is, they did go to court over Flair missing the fucking Nitro they wanted him to come to, or the TV or whatever, to go see Reed's title match, and it went to court for a while. I can't remember what. And then finally, that's when Flair came back and did the reunion promo that everybody remembers, where he came back to the company right after that. But during that period of time, so it had to be early 98, was where WWF had a pay-per-view in Greensboro at the Coliseum, and Flair was on the outs with WCW, and I was talking to Flair on the phone, and me and Rick had basically worked out, well, what if while we were on the air on the WWF pay-per-view in Greensboro, Ric Flair and his son Reed just happened to walk into the building and just happened to walk and sit down in the front row seat, or two of them, and our announcers went over and mentioned that there was a wrestling champion from the state of North Carolina here in the audience, and went over and interviewed Reed with Rick just sitting there saying nothing, right? And I told Vince, I said, would you do that? And he, oh, pal, get him on the phone. And they went as far as having the attorneys, because Rick was actually in his car, and he had that Mercedes, or was it a BMW? He actually had a phone before he had cell phones. He had a phone in his fucking car. He and Reed were circling the Greensboro Coliseum the day of that pay-per-view. Vince couldn't get on the phone with him because he didn't want to be arrested for or accused of contract tampering. So he was having me talk to him because we're just talking as friends, and I'm getting him the 2 free tickets. And Rick was talking to his attorney, which I think still at that time was still John Taylor from down in Atlanta, from the old Chory and Taylor firm. Anyway, Vince was all for it. I couldn't wait to see the fucking pop, and Rick just really wanted to fuck WCW, but his attorney finally said, nah, with where we are in the legal thing or whatever in your contract and blah, 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 don't do it. So they turned around and drove back to Charlotte. But that would have been a good deal. But anyway, so sometime after all this had gone down, it was in the WWF locker room, wasn't it? It was.
Yes, it was. It was after Bischoff came to the WWF.
Yeah. Basically, early 2000s, mid 2000s, somebody look up and do the timeline. After all the problems that they'd had with each other in WCW, Flair is in the WWF. Bischoff comes to the WWF to do his first run as an on-air performer. Flair was in a bad mood one day, apparently, and basically just fucking went in the locker room to Bischoff and said, all right, you motherfucker, you didn't want me to see my fucking son's fucking match, and you fucking told people you were going to sue me in the poorhouse, and fuck you, and took him down and was going for his fucking eye. And Arn, I believe, was watching the door until numbers, overwhelmed him to why then he joined in the breaking up of it. But he was, at first he was watching the door. And fucking Eric Bischoff's kung fu grip didn't do shit to fucking Ric Flair. That's why I said Vince McMahon's more of a man, more of a confrontational human being, aggressive than Bischoff is. Bischoff, the first thing he did when we had the table for three was fucking bond with me over my our mutual hatred of Vince Russo. He likes to fucking ingratiate himself to people, and Vince doesn't give a shit. And Flair was not in the mood to be ingratiating that day. So that's the point, is Bischoff is O for life when it comes to actual physical conflict with any of the boys. He just likes to claim that he fucking took all these courses and fucking, I guess he was Bruce Lee's goddamn Jeet Kune Do fucking apprentice or whatever. And that's why he gave Sonny Ono a job. Sonny Ono was his karate instructor, right? So he gives Sonny Ono a job, like he was a goddamn wrestling personality, and ended up suing him. All these motherfuckers. I'm astonished. But anyway, that was the story with Flair and Bischoff, and he got my eye, Lance. He got my goddamn eye.
Our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com, is from John Mauseri in Cleveland. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering your name. I'm sorry, John.
I bet you it ain't supposed to sound like that.
This is a question we've received from a lot of people. So let me, before I read it, ask you, are you aware of the, I guess, Twitter beef back and forth and some other comments between AJ Styles and CM Punk?
Now, I'm not up on this one, apparently.
All right, well, here's John's question. I would like to know your thoughts on CM Punk calling AJ Styles a racist.
What?
It seems like a cheap shot from Punk, who probably hasn't seen Styles in a long time. It was not like Styles said anything bad about Black Lives Matter, but Punk doesn't like that he hasn't said anything in support of it. Is Punk being outlandish here, or do you think Styles may be a racist? And I have a couple quotes here. So CM Punk tweeted out on the 5th, a lot of people snitching on themselves. When people tell you who they are, believe it. Might be unfortunate and disappointing if you're a fan of that person, or if it's your grandmother, but fuck 'em. Goodbye. I yield my time. Fuck you. And then someone responded, right? Silence speaks volumes. Seeing AJ Styles promote streams and shit, but couldn't be bothered to post anything, made it clear how he feels. That was a tough unfollow, to which CM Punk replied, well, come on. That one has been obvious for years. And then AJ.
Okay, if they're trying to have a Twitter feud, they need to pick it up. Somebody needs to get some color or something, because this is not goddamn very interesting to me. I don't know what the fuck they're even talking about.
AJ Styles, he responded, I will not react at all, coming from a guy that I don't respect anyway. It doesn't really matter.
Well, he sure put him in his place, too. No, AJ Styles is not a racist, for fuck's sake. AJ's a Republican, I think, because I was in TNA in 2008, and I was constantly publicly crossing my fingers that Obama was going to win this fucking election to save us from, everything he saved us from. And AJ was, I said, well, what the fuck? I said, my God, we need somebody now in this middle of all this shit that we're in that's inspirational. He said, well, if he wants to inspire people, let him be a motivational speaker. But it's not AJ's. AJ's from North Georgia, and he's religious. So it's not really his fault. He's one of those people that was brought up religious by his parents, and they fucking poisoned his mind. And he's just conservative. It's not that he's racist. And I don't even know now if he'd obviously be a Republican. Back then we were just worried about Bush doing something stupid. We didn't think he was a criminal. He was just an idiot. But now, it's obvious what we've got. So maybe he's not that way anymore. But I just think he's just unfortunately conservative because he's also religious, because he was brought up that way. It may not be his fault. I like AJ. I'm trying to make excuses for him, but he's not fucking racist. I'm making excuses for him for being a Republican.
Well, there was obviously that scene where Kid Rock went into the WWE Hall of Fame and made some shots at Democrats, and AJ was whooping it up in the front row.
Well, I didn't know about that.
And then, the one that people still point to is AJ, I guess, has a history of using the F word in and around wrestling, saying it to fans or saying it to wrestlers.
I've never heard. What, fuck?
Oh, no. The one for...
Oh, no.
The one that's a disparaging term for gay people.
Okay, I was going to say, you couldn't hardly get AJ Styles to cuss in a conversation in the locker room. He would sometimes say fudge, so I was going to call bullshit on that. Because
it's a well-known thing, because it was a very famous incident that's hysterical to this day. He was on Wrestling Observer Live once, and he was just mild-mannered AJ Styles answering questions. Hey, it's nice to talk to you. And someone called up and said, hi, Dave. Hi, AJ. I'd like to know what AJ's thoughts are about his popularity with the gay community. And AJ instantly went from being mild-mannered, like, hey, how you doing, to the gay community? He was so offended by the idea that he had a following in the gay community.
Oh, God. Well, see, that's it. Unfortunately, once again, I don't think that AJ hates gay people. It's just like he hates the idea that anybody would think that he was having any kind of gay sex, because, once again, he's from North Georgia and he's religious. And people have been saying, oh, my God, that would be like the worst thing that could ever happen to him, would be to touch another man's weenie or something. And it's funny. It's not that he's homophobic like he wants gay people to die. It's just that he's like one of these people, is religious and from a small town and conservative, and it just like gives them the heebie-jeebies that they might have penis on them or something. So AJ's
listening to you get around the word ignorant is very interesting.
Well, I'm just, I'm trying to make it entertaining, but I don't think that he hates anybody or wants any bad things to happen to people, but he's just skeevy about stuff like that because of his underprivileged upbringing, being religious and conservative and Southern.
And he doesn't have any respect for CM Punk.
And I didn't know there was heat there, but there you go. But that was a most boring fucking Twitter goddamn exchange. Nobody was accused of being a goddamn pervert or nobody was told they ought to be boiled in oil. Nobody was cussed within an inch of their life. Fuck.
Speaking of Twitter exchanges, you may remember last week we talked about the Tommaso Ciampa Randy Orton Twitter exchange.
Yes, we did.
Several listeners have sent in a quote. I don't know where this is from, but several people have sent the same quote in. It's not attributed to any direct interview or anything, but I'm going to read this to you. This is from Randy Orton. Everyone wants to know your thoughts on this. The NXT guys worry me because I see them doing such highly physical things during their matches. It's almost like they do so many impressive things, but those things are dangerous and they wear and tear on your career. I've been doing this 20 years, and I'll do it another decade. I just turned 40, and my plan is to keep going until my 50th birthday, and I think I'd be able to do that, and I'd be able to support my family for 30 years of wrestling under Vince McMahon because of the way I tell stories in the ring. The facial expressions, the little transitional things that you do on the fly, or you ad-lib, so to speak, during a match. Those are the things that people remember. I watched a match the other day, and I'm not going to name names, and a lot of the NXT guys work like this, and it was just train wreck after train wreck after train wreck, and it's all very impressive, but when it's all said and done and the match is over, I couldn't remember anything that happened, because it was just movement. It was just car crashes. And when you see so much of that back to back, and you don't see how affected the talent, meaning they didn't sell that move or there wasn't enough of a delay between high spots, that I was able to see facial expressions and see that, oh, this guy's hurt, or he hurt his neck on that spot, and he just tried to pick up the other guy because he couldn't because his neck is hurt. Oh, I think he's really hurt. You don't get to invest in these matches because they are just boom, 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 one thing after another. And even though it is highly physically impressive, I wouldn't be able to do that style. A lot of the things these guys do, I'm not capable of doing, but they're going to have very short careers. And those are Randy Orton's comments about NXT. What are your thoughts?
Well, I now think that apparently Randy Orton is the smartest, most intelligent, and most perceptive, and potentially most eloquent graduate of Ohio Valley Wrestling. That's what I think, because I wish I'd have said that myself. I possibly would have punctuated a little better. Yes, everything he said is exactly, not just with NXT, but almost any wrestling today. That's exactly what he said. And Randy Orton has been making 7 figures a year for close to 20 years and will do so there in that company for another 10. And some of these guys are going to come and go by the time it takes him to fucking have a new T-shirt design made because of that very issue. And also, nobody is going to register and get over with the fans as well as Randy Orton has because of the things that he mentioned in that they're not doing while they're in the middle of doing all them train wrecks. It's just meaningless motion is what everybody's trying to worry about instead of the viewer being able to, because I blame the video games. That's what the matches look like, because that's what all these guys do now, that it's illegal to try to go out and get some pussy because somebody will catch you. So all they do is play video games, and that's what their matches look like. And, that's unfortunately the problem. But he's very perceptive. And also he is, at the end of his career, he will have made 5 to 10 to 20 times the money that most of the people that he's talking about will have made in their careers. So there's that. And he'll probably feel better physically.
It seems like whenever you talk to a wrestler who has worked with Randy, they really put him over big. But you hear from a lot of fans that, he's boring, or, his matches are slow. What do you think fans that think that are missing about Randy Orton?
Well, I can tell you what the people that work with him aren't missing is that they never get hurt. And he's always where he's supposed to be, and he always does the things the way that he's supposed to do, the way he's supposed to do them, and nobody gets hurt, and the match gets over. What the people that don't get it are missing is those 500,000 people that would rather be watching a bunch of fucking kids play trampoline on Wednesday nights. And that's what those fans don't get. They're not looking at a competition. They're not looking at a struggle or a contest. They're not looking at an athletic endeavor. They're not looking at a goddamn match where people are trying to give the impression that they're competing or fighting for something. They're waiting to see the fucking tumbling routine. And here comes Olga Corbett on the floor exercise or the uneven parallel bars. And so they're not going to like that. And all that kind of wrestling does is draw money and get over.
All right, let's get 1 or 2 more questions before we wrap things up. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jeremy. I was wondering how you explain that, according to multiple locker room sources, Bret Hart hit a single blow under the chin of Vince McMahon, yet a couple days later, in the Work TV interview orchestrated by Shitstain, where Vince uttered the now famous "Bret screwed Bret," he sports a black eye. So he got hit in the jaw, knocked out, but then he has a black eye. How do you explain that?
Well, I think people are conflating their stories. I always heard it was an uppercut. I didn't hear it was an uppercut to the chin. An uppercut can hit you in the face anywhere. And since Vince is actually 2 or 3 inches taller than Bret, that makes sense. But no, he hit him in the fucking eye. Vince didn't go fucking the hard way himself in the goddamn mirror after he'd been punched in front of at least a dozen fucking people to give himself a mark in a different place, for fuck's sake. Now we're trying to find another conspiracy theory. Jesus Christ. Should anybody watch any boxing films just because an uppercut comes from below to up doesn't mean it doesn't hit you in the face?
This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Chris in Quebec City, Canada. How did it work when a promoter wanted to book Andre the Giant back in the day? Did they just call him, or did they have to go through Vince McMahon Sr.? If you didn't have a good relationship with Vince McMahon Sr., were you shit out of luck? Did you just pay Andre at the end of the night, or did you have to pay Vince McMahon Sr., who then paid Andre later on? Was he typically working for a flat fee or a percent of the gate?
Good God. A lot of questioning there. First of all, once that Andre, and obviously the new book on Andre that we highly recommend by Bertrand Hebert and Pat LaPrade tells you a great amount of detail on how Andre came to North America and was booked out of Montreal and had his first exposure for Vern Gagne in the AWA. But once that Vince McMahon Sr. took over his booking and signed him to a contract and became his booker, no, you didn't call Andre. Because Andre was all over the fucking world every day, and there were no cell phones back in those days. You would work it through Vince Sr. and his office, and every promoter knew that. And dates on the Giant, obviously, were highly prized because it would always lead to the house being up whenever Andre came to town, except in the rare occasions in a few places where he had been there so much that he almost became commonplace. Then every once in a while, the edge would be off of it, and you'd want to leave him off for a while and then bring him back. I mean, it got to the point where he was in Atlanta a lot at one point because that was a major airport hub, blah, blah, blah. But Watts used to tell me that the way Vince Sr. worked it, because he was the owner of the biggest promotion in the country, the biggest territory financially in the country, and also he had Andre under contract. He could pay guys that were working in your territory more than you could. So, but instead of stealing them, Vince Sr. would say that he would call Watts and he'd say, boy, I really want Waldo Von Erich to start as my, heel to work with Bruno or whatever. Do you think he could be finished up for you in a couple of months? Oh, sure, Vince. Yes, Watts is going to finish Waldo, because Waldo's going to go anyway because the money's going to be better. But when Watts worked with Vince on seamlessly arranging the transition so that everybody was happy, then Vince Sr. would say, tell you what, I'll give you a week on the Giant in September. He can make your Superdome show or whatever. And that's the way something like that happened. But if you just wanted Andre, you called and said, when can I get a date or dates on Andre? And the New York office would send back his available dates. And then if you could work it out where you could get Andre in Georgia or Florida or Tennessee for the week of March 1st through the 8th, you tried to put him in, obviously, in all of your biggest towns in the main event, figure out some way that he's involved. Some babyface needs a special partner, or some heel team needs the Giant to come in for a handicap match and beat the fuck out of him, or whatever it may be. And yes, Vince got a booking fee off of doing that, off of Andre's money. I think it probably, even if there was an agreement, it probably depended on who the promoter was. If you were more in with Vince, you probably got a better deal. I don't know about the percentage versus the payoff. At first, was it not that when he was first making the tours around the country, 74, 75, 76, he was a percentage? But later on, he was still did main event pay, but he only worked big buildings. So, it all worked out. What do you know, Brian?
I'm not sure off the top.
I don't even know if that's one question that the book went into. I remember it talked about some of the payoffs that he got and the amounts that he made, but I don't know that if it differentiated whether it was percentage or payoff. But obviously, Andre was the highest paid wrestler in the world in the 1970s. He made the Guinness Book of World Records. It would have been Andre, Bruno Sammartino, and whoever the NWA champion would have been the three highest paid wrestlers in the business in the 70s, except for Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki, who were at a whole nother they were in another world and had a whole other economics going on. But as far as in the actual wrestling business anywhere but Japan for those two, Andre, Bruno, and the NWA champion. And then there were a few guys underneath that would start surprising some people. And I guarantee you there was a couple of years that neither Ole Anderson nor Jerry Lawler nor Dusty Rhodes were very far off NWA title money because they had either a piece of the promotion or were booking a major territory or whatever.
You think Mil Mascaras ever got on that list?
Boy, because he did so little work in this country overall, and as opposed to his appearances in Mexico, he made good money in this country because you wouldn't bring Mascaras in unless you were going to feature him and pay him where he was going to draw: Houston, California, New York. But I don't know what the pay structure was like in Mexico and what the economy was like. I mean, he always lived well from what you could tell in Mexico and was probably the highest paid guy there, but I don't know what that would have translated to at that time, versus where everybody else was.
Did you ever hear anything about Eddie Einhorn's payoffs or Pedro Martinez when he was partnering with Eddie Einhorn with the IWA?
I heard he was fair, but not markish. And I mean, you would add, or now that you mention it, you'd add guys to that list of almost the highest paid wrestlers in the business, like Vern Gagne, because, but where do you separate the wrestling pay from the fact that he owned the thing too? Some of Vern's top guys, like Nick Bockwinkel, would make $150,000 a year, but they'd only work 15 days a month. So there were a variety of, I think Einhorn, to further answer your question, was more noted for his regular business contacts, ability to get on television and ability to get into buildings and things because of his pro sports connections and his TV, connections and et cetera, rather than he treated everybody fairly, but I don't think he was throwing money around left and right where anybody was, the highest paid guy in the business by working.
But that's why I asked, though, because they got Mascaras and they made him their champion, and obviously Mascaras had already...
just put a period on it. They got Mascaras and made him their champion. To be a world champion in America, you think he's going to hold him up for money? I'm sure he fucking got a good deal, but that was a big part of that. Just like when Inoki bought Pedro Martinez's territory in Buffalo and Cleveland because of and made the NWF. He wanted to be a world champion in America, so he bought the fucking company. At least Mascaras didn't have to buy the fucking company.
All right. Well, with that, we wrap up another drive-through. Of course, the Jim Cornette Experience debuts on Friday, wherever you find your favorite podcast, but you can hear the drive-through and the experience, the full shows, the clips, the omnibus collections, tinyurl.com/official corny YouTube, or just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. Thank you to everyone who's been subscribing and watching the videos. We really do appreciate it. Of course, patreon.com/Cornette to access the archives of the drive-through and the experience from 2013 and 2014 with new episodes added each and every Sunday night. $5 a month gets you in the door. It's the best deal in wrestling. Once again, patreon.com/Cornette. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at @GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast. 605pod.com are available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts. Don't forget, Cornette's Collectibles at a website we will not be naming, a action figure bonanza, starting today as you're listening to this on Monday.
They have already stopped. We don't know how long these things are going to last. So it was 9 o'clock this morning. Anything could have happened.
If you got shut out of getting an action figure, you may want to sue. Call Stephen Pinu, 888-692-8084, or visit newlawoffice.com. And I think that's it. Until Friday on The Experience, and next week right here again on the drive-thru. For Jim Cornette, I'm the great Brian Last. Tally-ho!